Okay, so Torah portion is called Mishpatim. It's often translated as judgments. And I'll get into a little bit of the words around Mishpatim, the Greek words that are used to translate it and things like that. But I think that the best translation of it is justices. Okay, especially or when it's Yehovah's Mishpatim, because if it was just a man that was making a judgment, then it would just be a judgment. When it's Yehovah, then it's justice, because we know that he makes righteous Mishpatim. So we're going to have a look at the actual laws. It's one of my favorite Torah portions, actually. And the actual laws are for the judges to enforce. Okay, so you've got Mishpatim, which are for the Shoftim, which is the plural of Shafat, which is to judge, and also a judge is a Shafat. So the Mishpat team, if you like. Okay, so it's all based around that verb to judge, to Shafat. So these are things that the judges would judge people by. And it's interesting when we consider Yehovah as judge. In the first part, we're going to look at what it is to be justified by Yehovah as well, because he is just and he makes righteous judgments, and his law is righteous, but we've all fallen short of his Torah. So part of his justice is that he gives grace for transgression, but we'll get into all of that. Okay, so this is the Hebrew word shafat. It says here judgment, justice, or ordinance. It's actually very rarely translated as justice in the King James Version, but I think that's the best translation. See the word used in Genesis 18:25. Abraham says, "Far be it from you to act in this way, to slay the righteous with the wrong, so that the righteous should be as the wrong. Far be it from you, does the shafat of all the earth not do mishpat?" Okay, so in the Hebrew, there's a little bit extra depth there. You know, does the one that shafats all the earth, all the world, does he not do justice? Does he not do mishpat? If you're shafating, you should be doing mishpat. Leviticus 5 verse 10 says, "And he shall prepare the second as a burnt offering according to the mishpat," translated as the manner here. When you see this in the text, to do something according to the manner, all it means is that it's previously been given as part of the Torah how something is to be done. So the Torah doesn't go over things multiple times. If it just needs to say something like make a burnt offering, it doesn't say make a burnt offering, this is how you make the burnt offering. It says do it according to the mishpat, according to the justice that's already been given. In other words, the just way to do something. Numbers 9 verse 14, "When a stranger sojourns among you, then he shall perform the Passover of Yehovah. He shall do so according to the law of the Passover and according to its mishpat," so the shafat, or the mishpat rather, surrounding the law of the Passover. Leviticus 18:4-5 says, "Do my mishpatim and cherish my laws to walk in them." Often that's translated as statutes. Do my statutes. "I am Yehovah your Elohim." Of course, we know that the Torah isn't his law. Okay, this word here would be better translated law. His statutes are his laws. His Torah is his teaching and instruction, the things which he disseminates to mankind. "And you shall guard my laws and my mishpatim, which a man does and lives by them. I am Yehovah." And that's not kind of like we would say, this is the code that I live by. That's not what it's saying. It's almost like, and is given life by them. I am Yehovah. "You are to have one mishpat for the stranger and for the native. I am Yehovah your Elohim." So when it comes to justice, one of the things that we're going to see as we go through is that it's a level playing field for everyone. Doesn't matter if you're rich, whether you're poor, whether you're righteous, whether you're wicked. Justice is justice, and it must be done to everyone the same. Deuteronomy 25 verse 1 says, "When there is a dispute between men, then they shall come unto Mishpat, and they shall be shaphated, they shall be judged, and the righteous declared righteous, and the wrongdoer declared wrong. And I've had people mention before when I've spoken about the death penalty, they've said, well, surely now we're giving grace. What if somebody repents when they've done a crime that carries the death penalty? What happens if they repent? Are they forgiven? And it's just to misunderstand that there are courts here on the earth that do justice according to the Torah. And in those courts, the righteous are declared righteous and the wrongdoer is declared wrong. Actually, what the Hebrew says is the righteous is justified and the wrongdoer is declared wrong. But when it comes to Yehovah, he takes all of us as wrongdoers and he justifies us. So we're going to have a look at that concept, but it's just because there's the two different courts, if you like. Yehovah as judge is the one person who can give grace for these things. When it comes to a court on the earth, if you've done something that carries the death penalty, then that's what you will receive. Numbers 27 verse 5 says, Moshe then brought the case before Yehovah. Really, the word is Mishpat. Again, all of these things are just English approximations of this one Hebrew concept. So we would say case. It's almost like saying, though, brought their need for justice or their request for justice before Yehovah. Deuteronomy 4:5-8 says, See, I have taught you laws and Mishpatim, as Yehovah my Elohim commanded me to do thus in the land which you go to possess. And you shall guard and do them, for this is your wisdom and understanding before the eyes of the peoples who hear all these laws. And they shall say, Only a wise and understanding people is this great nation. So through Yehovah giving us his Mishpatim, his justices, his version of what is just, he tells us what is just and what is wrong. People look on and they see the wisdom in these things. They say, for what great nation is there which has Elohim so near to it as Yehovah our Elohim is to us whenever we call on him? And what great nation is there that has such laws and righteous justices like all this Torah which I set before you this day? So the word there for righteous justices, okay, justices in the English is a plural, isn't it? So it's Mishpatim, justices. You see the word for righteous here, though, is also pluralized. It's Zadakim. If you're to describe something as righteous, you use the word Zadik. Okay, if you say that a man is righteous, you say that he is righteous, by implication, a righteous one. So the adjective, the describing word that you use there is Zadik. When you use an adjective with something that's pluralized, you pluralize the adjective as well. So you get Mishpatim, Zadakim in the Hebrew, and that's righteous justices in the English. But that's why it's good to translate it as justice rather than judgment, because Yehovah is telling us what is just, and he does it according to righteousness. 1 Samuel 30:22-25, we see a Mishpatim that is instigated by a man, by King David. It says, And all the evil and worthless men of those who went with David answered and said, Because they did not go with us, we do not give them any of their spoil that we have rescued, except for every man's wife and child, and let them take them and go. But David said, My brothers, do not do so with what Yehovah has given us, for who has protected us and gave into our hand the band that came against us? And who would listen to you in this matter? For as his portion is who goes down to the battle, so is his portion who remains with the baggage. They share alike. So he says, the spoil is to be shared amongst everyone. And it came to be from that day forward that he, King David, appointed it for a law, for a chok, or for a statute, and a mishpat for Yisrael to this day. So this is King David instituting a mishpat. Because it's a mishpat that a man's instigated, I've translated it judgment. When it's Yehovah, though, inherently they are just, they are righteous. The word righteous means just also. Psalm 9, 1-16. I praise you, O Yehovah, with my heart. I declare all your wonders. I rejoice and exult in you. I sing praise to your name, O Most High. So these words should be slightly familiar from a couple of weeks ago. Okay, praise Yada from Yehudah, which is, or where Yehudah comes from, which is praise Yehovah. To rejoice is a word that Charlie mentioned last week, to samach, and exult in you. I sing praise to your name, but as we saw, to zamar is actually to pluck the strings or to make reverberate. So it's, I play instruments to your name almost. When my enemies turn back, they stumble and perish before you. For you executed my, it says right here, it's mishpat, justice, and my cause. You sat on the throne, shaphating in righteousness. So when Yehovah judges, he judges in righteousness. The noun is tzedek. Okay, tzedek is the adjective to describe something as righteous. The noun, which is righteousness, is tzedek. You have rebuked the Gentiles, you have destroyed the wrong, you have wiped out their name forever and ever. The enemy is no more, ruins everlasting, and you have uprooted the cities, even their remembrance has perished. But Yehovah abides forever, he is preparing his throne for Mishpat. And he judges the world in tzedek. He judges the peoples in straightness. So righteousness, okay, can be being just as well, or justice, I suppose, would be a noun that can describe righteousness. Yehovah is a refuge for the crushed one, a refuge in times of distress. And those who know your name trust in you, for you have not forsaken those who seek you, O Yehovah. Zamar to Yehovah who dwells in Sion, declare his deeds among the peoples. For he remembers the seekers of bloodshed. He does not forget the cry of the afflicted. Show favor to me, O Yehovah. See my affliction by those who hate me. You lift me up, that word room, to lift up from the gates of death, so that I declare all your tehillah, almost all your hymns in the gate of the daughter of Sion. I rejoice in your deliverance, and that's that word gale, to have that kind of feeling of spinning round with violent emotion with in your deliverance, or your salvation is the other word that could be used there. The Gentiles have sunk down in the pit which they made, in the net which they hid, their own foot is caught. Yehovah has made himself known, he has done mishpat. The wrong is snared in the work of his own hands. Meditation, Selah. Psalm 119, 17 to 20 says, do good to your servant and let me live, and I shamar your word, keep, or to protect it, by implication here, to cherish your word. Open my eyes that I might see wonders from your Torah. I am a sojourner in the earth. Do not hide your mitzvot from me. My soul is crushed with longing for your justices at all time. Psalm 119, 160 has an interesting phrase in. It says, your word is truth from the beginning. It is emet from the beginning. And all your justice of righteousness for forever. That's literally what it says. In the Hebrew, you see here it says, vulolam. Okay, when you have a vav, that means and. Here, it's got a vowel which makes it vu. And then you've got the word olam. And olam means forever or eternally, or is saying something that is enduring. So vu lolam means and. The lamed makes it to or for olam, eternity or endurance. Kal mishpat. Charlie looked at the word kal last week. It means all, okay? All mishpat, all justice. Tzedek, which is righteousness or justice. All and all your justice of righteousness for forever is what it says. Okay, so the word krino in Greek, okay, because when we have mishpat, we want to see what these things are in the New Testament. We want to see how we can take this idea of Yehovah's mishpat, his justice, and see what we can learn of it from the New Testament. So we have the Greek word krino, which is equivalent to the Hebrew shafat. So shafat is to judge, it's the verb. This is the Greek verb which means the same thing. It says here to separate or to put asunder, which is what you're doing when you are judging one thing from the other. You're separating one from the other. For example, the righteous from the unrighteous. So to krino is to judge. John 3:17, for Elohim did not send his son into the world to judge the world, to shafat the world, but that the world through him might be saved. Luke 22:29-30 says, and I covenant for you as my Father covenanted for me, a kingdom, to eat and drink at my table in my kingdom, and to sit on thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. So he's talking to his disciples here. John 12:48 says, he who rejects me and does not receive my words has one who judges him, one who shafats him. The word that I have spoken shall shafat him in the last day. From krino, okay, so from this root word here, which is krino, to judge, we get this word, which is krima. And krima is a word which is used in the place of mishpat in the Old Testament, in the Septuagint. Deuteronomy 4:8 in the Masoretic text says, and what nation is there that has such laws and righteous justices? Okay, Mishpatim, Sadakim, as we saw before, as Sadakim. Deuteronomy 4:8 in the Septuagint says, krima dikaios. Okay, so krima is the word instead of mishpat. Dikaios is instead of the word of zadik. So dikaios means righteous, the adjective to describe something as righteous, by which you can also say a righteous person. Dikaios is a zadik, and krima is in the place of mishpat. Matthew 7:1-2 in the New Testament then says, do not krino lest you be krino. Do not shafat lest you be shafated. For with what krima, with what mishpat you shafat, you shall be shafated. Okay, so you can see how this would be written in Hebrew. It makes more sense, because once we start going to Greek, we lose mishpat. Mishpat can be translated into English in various ways, as we saw, right or case or judgment or justice. It can also be translated into Greek in different ways as well. So as soon as we lose mishpat, we start diluting the meaning, and then when we go from Greek to English, we dilute it even more. But we can see here that this is clearer what it's talking about, judging with mishpat or shafating with mishpat. Romans 2:2 says, and we know that the mishpat of Elohim, the krima of Elohim, is according to truth against those who practice such wrongs. Okay, the other word, which is translated from mishpat, is krisis. Kind of means something very similar, like justice or judgment does in English. I see in Jeremiah 5, verse 28 in the Masoretic text, it says, and the justice of the needy they did not judge. Okay, the mishpat of the needy they did not judge. In the Septuagint, it says, and they have transgressed the rule of judgment. So when you read it in the English, you think, wow, the rule of judgment, what's this? Is this something new? But it's the Greek word krisis, which is put in place of the word mishpat. Okay, so they have transgressed the mishpat. They have not krinoed or shafated the cause of the orphan. They have not shafated the cause of the widow. Matthew 10 verse 15 says, truly I say to you, it shall be more bearable for the land of Sodom and Amorah in the day of judgment than for that city in the day of mishpat, the day of justice for that city. John 7:24, do not krino according to appearance. Do not shafat according to appearance, but shafat with righteous judgment, the kaios, krisis, or mishpatim, zadikim, as we saw before. Leviticus 19 verse 15 says, do no unrighteousness in justice or in mishpat. Do not be partial to the poor or favor the face of the great, but shafat your neighbor in righteousness, in tzedek. Okay, so this will be important later actually. So we've got this word here, which is dikaiokrisia. Okay, and you can see that it's from the word dikaios, which is righteousness or justice, and krisis, which we saw is in the place of mishpat. This word's only used once in the New Testament. It says, but according to your hardness and your unrepentant heart, you're treasuring up for yourself wrath in the day of wrath and revelation of the day of righteous judgment, and the revelation of righteous judgment, the dikaiokrisia of Elohim. So this idea of Mishpatim, Tzadikim, is actually all the way through the New Testament. We can just kind of miss it. Deuteronomy 4 verse 8, which we read from the Masoretic text before in the Septuagint, says again, krima dikaios. So you can see how this is constituted of the same words. Krima, which comes from to krino, to judge, and dikaios, which is righteousness. Okay, the word dikaios, righteousness, righteous or observing divine laws. We see that used in Matthew 1 verse 19. And Yosef, her husband, being righteous, being dikaios, and not wishing to make a show of her, had in mind to put her away secretly. So this is equivalent to the Hebrew word, which is zadik. So you can describe someone as a tzaddik. Here you can describe someone in Greek as being a dikaios, but they're adjectives. It's a word that you use to describe them. They are a righteous or a righteous one. Same in Matthew 5 verse 45. So that you become sons of your Father in the heavens, because he makes his sun rise on the wicked and the good, and sends rain on the dikaios and on the unrighteous. Luke 23 verse 50 says, and see, a man named Yosef, a council member, a good and dikaios man. Isaiah 61 verse 8 says, for I am the Lord who loves righteousness. Okay, so that is the noun, which in Hebrew is tzedek. In Greek it is dikaiosuna, and hate robberies of injustice, and I will give their labor to the dikaios. Okay, so dikaiosuna coming from dikaios. This is the word dikaiosuna, and again, it's a noun, and it means righteousness. Romans 6 verse 20 uses this noun. It says, for when you were servants of sin, you were free from dikaiosuna. Okay? Acts 10:34-35 says, in opening his mouth, Kepha said, truly I see that Elohim shows no partiality, but in every nation he who fears him and works dikaiosuna is accepted by him. So what he's talking about here is he's just been told, no, if I've cleansed the Gentiles, then they've been made clean, and you can't not accept them. You're to go to the Gentiles. I've made them clean. They've turned to me in repentance. They work righteousness. Acts 17 verse 31 says, because he has set a day on which he is going to krino the world in dikaiosuna by a man whom he has appointed, having given proof of this to all by raising him from the dead. Okay, this word is a very important word for us to look at. Okay, it's how it is afforded to us to be given grace by Yahovah, because none of us have been righteous. None of us can say that we've done no unrighteousnesses. So how is it that we can ever be said by Elohim, we can be declared righteous by Elohim? So the word there is dikaiao, and it means, you'll have often seen it perhaps, as justify, or it's to render righteous. And it's the way that Yehovah can take somebody who has done unrighteousnesses and he can declare them to be right still. Think of it kind of like if there was a requirement to enter into the police force, to be a police officer, you had to have always followed the law, okay? But you hadn't. It's like the police chief saying, this person here, they've not always followed the law, but I'm going to justify them being allowed into the police force, even though they would have had to have followed the law in order to be righteous. I'm going to justify them. I'm going to accept them. So Acts 13:38-39 says, let it therefore be known to you, brothers, that through this one forgiveness of sins is proclaimed to you. And by him everyone who believes is dikaiao from all sins, is justified from all sins. He's declared to be right, even though he's done unrighteousnesses, from which you were not able to be dikaiao by the Torah of Moses. So, to enter into the police force, you would have had to have kept the law. Okay? If you've broken the law, though, there's no way that you can be justified to enter into the police force by the law. It doesn't matter how much you keep the law after you've broken it, you've still done unrighteousnesses in the allegory here. Okay, so for us, once we've broken the Torah, there's no way that we can be declared right by the Torah. It's going to take Yehovah to declare us right, and that's done for us by Yeshua. Romans 4 verse 2 says, for if Abraham was dikaiao by works, he has ground for boasting, but not before Elohim. So it wasn't by Abraham's works. As we'll see in a bit, his works were involved in it, but he was not dikaiao by works. He was declared right with Elohim. Elohim said, no, this guy's all right. Okay, he can come in by faith. Galatians 3 verse 11 says, and that no one is dikaiao by Torah before Elohim is clear, for the righteous shall live by belief. Okay, so to be accepted by Yehovah, for him to justify us, can never happen by the Torah. Doesn't matter how much Torah we do, how many righteousnesses we do, we have done unrighteousness before. So it's going to take an act of grace, an act of mercy for Yehovah to say, no, this guy's okay. Romans 3 verse 20 says, therefore by works of Torah no flesh shall be dikaiao before him, for by the Torah is the knowledge of sin. And as we get into this, we're going to see that the Torah was added because of transgressions, and we'll see some of the laws that are given and some of the transgressions earlier in the scriptures. Okay, so by the Torah is the knowledge of sin. The Torah is incredibly useful for us. It's incredibly good for us to have, because by it we can see what is not acceptable with Elohim. Okay, Abraham was declared right by faith though, and then the Torah came later for people of faith to know what is right and what is wrong. 1 Corinthians 6, 9-11 says, do you not know that the unrighteous, the adikos, shall not inherit the kingdom of Elohim? Do not be deceived, neither those who whore, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor effeminate, nor homosexuals, nor thieves, nor greedy of gain, nor drunkards, nor revilers, nor swindlers shall inherit the kingdom of Elohim. And such were some of you. Okay, so we were taken from being unrighteous and we were justified before Elohim through Yeshua. But you were washed, but you were set apart, but you were dikaiao, you were justified, you were sanctified, you were made holy, and you were washed of your previous sins by Yeshua's blood. In the name of the Master Yeshua and by the Spirit of Elohim. Galatians 2, 17-18 says, and if, while seeking to be dikaiao by Messiah, okay, so we are seeking to be justified before Elohim by Messiah, because we can't seek to be justified by our works because we've all done unrighteousnesses. But if while we're seeking to be justified by Messiah, we ourselves are found to be sinners, is Messiah then a servant of sin? Let it not be. Is he going to justify a sinner? No, he's going to justify people who've turned to do what is righteous. For if I rebuild what I once overthrew, I establish myself a transgressor. It's essentially saying, what if while I'm seeking to be declared right, I declare myself to be a transgressor? Am I trying to make Messiah a servant of sin? Okay, you can seek to be declared right, but declare yourself to be wrong. James 2:20-24 says, "But do you wish to know, O foolish man, that the belief without the works is dead? Was not Abraham our father dikaiao by works when he offered Yitzchak his son on the altar? Do you see that the belief was working with his works, and by the works the belief was perfected?" Okay, so we've all done unrighteousnesses. We can't be declared right by Elohim because of our works. He's going to look at us, in fact, and he's going to say, I can't declare you right because you're not right. However, I can declare you right by my grace because you have faith. The scripture was filled which says, Abraham believed Elohim, and it was reckoned to him for righteousness, for dikaiosuna. Okay, and he was called Elohim's friend. You see then that a man is declared right by works and not by belief alone. So as we know, works, no, you can't be declared right with those alone. No one can be, because that would make God a liar. We can be declared right by faith. However, that faith must be accompanied by doing something. You must be doing what is righteous as well to show your faith. This word is dikaiosis. Okay, so we've looked at to justify something. It's a verb, isn't it? You justify something, you declare it to be right. Once that's been done, it's been called justification. So there's a couple of uses of this. Not because of him alone was it written that it was reckoned to him, but also because of us, to whom it shall be reckoned, to us who believe in him who raised up Yeshua our Master from the dead, who was delivered up because of our trespasses and was raised for us to be declared right, or for us to be justified, or to have justification, perhaps. Romans 5:18 says, "So then, as through one trespass there resulted condemnation to all men, so also through one righteous act there resulted right standing of life to all men." So through what Yeshua did, all men could be declared to be right if they turn in faith and they do what is righteous. Okay, so the Hebrew equivalent of that word is sadak, because often we think of things like justification and things like that as things which only happen in the New Testament, but that's simply not true. To be justified is something that we see in the Old Testament as well. Isaiah 53 verse 11 says, "He would see the suffering of his soul and be satisfied. Through his knowledge, my righteous servant makes many righteous." Okay, he declares right many, he justifies many, and that in Hebrew, as I say, is to zadak them. Genesis 44 verse 16, when Judah and the brothers are before Joseph, and Yehudah said, "What do we say to my master? How do we speak? Or how do we zadak ourselves? Elohim has found out the crookednesses of your servants." So they're saying, we've done unrighteousness. How is it that we can be declared right? Okay, this is their appeal to Yosef, picture of Messiah, obviously. But the same is true for us. Elohim has found out our crookednesses. How is it that we could be justified to enter into his kingdom? 2 Samuel 15 verse 4. Absalom would say, "Oh, that I were made Shaphat in the land, and everyone who has any complaint or case will come to me, and I shall let right be done to him," we've got in this translation. But actually what it says is quite insidious. It's saying, "Oh, that I were made to be the one who would Shaphat." everyone who has any complaint or mishpat, justice, they're seeking justice, will come to me and I would justify him. Okay, so he's saying that he would declare them to be right. This is done by many people today who, according to the word of Elohim, they are in the wrong. Elohim would declare them wrong, but men take it upon themselves to justify others. Okay, the word Tzaddik has been mentioned. It's an adjective to describe what is just, what is lawful, what is righteous. Psalm 119, 137 says, Tzaddik are you, O Yehovah. So Yehovah is Tzaddik, and your justices are straight, your Mishpatim. But as we see, Yehovah is Tzaddik, he is just. So his judgments are justices, if that makes sense. Genesis 18 verse 26, and Yehovah said, if I find in Sodom 50 Tzaddik within the city, then I shall spare all the place for their sakes. Ezekiel 18, 5-9 gives us a good idea of what is Tzaddik before Yehovah. But if a man is Tzaddik and shall do mishpat, shall do justice and righteousness, tzedakah, if he is not eaten on the mountains, nor lifted up his eyes to the idols of the house of Israel, nor defiled his neighbor's wife, nor comes near a woman during her uncleanness, if he does not oppress anyone, does return to the debtor his pledge, does not commit robbery, does give his bread to the hungry, and covers the naked with a garment, if he does not lend on interest or take increase, turns back his hand from unrighteousness, executes mishpat in emet, between man and man, if he walks in my laws and he cherishes my justices in truth, he is Tzaddik, he shall certainly live. Okay, when Yehovah said you will surely die, that was the word for death twice, mut. Here it is you shall surely live, chaya. So when somebody turns to walk in what Yehovah declares as righteousness, to walk in his laws, to walk in his justices, okay, he is Tzaddik. He may have done unrighteousnesses, but Yehovah declares him righteous. He declares him Tzaddik, and he shall chaya, declares the Master Yehovah. Okay, the word tzedek and the word tzedakah are righteousness, that noun, to describe the concept of righteousness. It's a masculine and a feminine noun. When you have a on the end of words, it makes them feminine. So you get tzedek and tzedakah. Psalm 11, 4-7 says, Yehovah is in his set-apart temple. The throne of Yehovah is in the heavens. His eyes see, his eyelids examine the sons of men. Yehovah tries the Tzaddik, but his soul shall hate the wrong and the one who loves violence. Upon the wrong he rains snares, fire and sulfur, and a scorching wind are the portion of their cup. For Yehovah is Tzaddik, he has loved tzedakah. The upright shall see his face. Deuteronomy 25:1, we read it before. When there's a dispute between men, then they shall come unto justice, or mishpat, to seek justice. And they shall be shaphated. And the tzaddik shall be declared righteous. They shall be tzaddak. They shall be justified, and the wrongdoer declared wrong. So if we saw, this is what happens in the courts of men. In Proverbs 17 verse 15 it says, he who declares the wrong right, he who tzaddaks the wrong, he who justifies the wrong, and he who condemns the righteous, the tzaddik, both of them are an abomination to Yehovah. So to declare the wrong right, if you are a man, is an abomination to Yehovah. Well, praise Yehovah that he is just, and part of his justice is that he can declare somebody who has done unrighteousnesses to be just before him. He can justify them. Romans 5, 1-11 says, therefore, having been declared right, dikaiaod, by belief, we have peace with Elohim through our Master Yeshua Messiah, through whom also we have access by belief into this favor in which we stand, and we exult in the expectation of the esteem of Elohim. And not only this, but we also exult in pressures, knowing that pressure works endurance, and endurance approvedness, and approvedness expectation. And expectation does not disappoint, because the love of Elohim has been poured out in our hearts by the set-apart Spirit which was given to us. For when we were still weak, Messiah in due time died for the wicked. So Messiah zadaked the wicked. He justified the wicked. For one shall hardly die for a righteous one, though possibly for a good one, someone would even have the courage to die. But Elohim proves his own love for us in that while we were still sinners, Messiah died for us. Much more then, having now been declared right by his blood, we shall be saved from wrath through him. For if being enemies we were reconciled with Elohim through the death of his Son, much more, having been reconciled, we shall be saved by his life. And not only this, but we also exult in Elohim through our Master Yeshua Messiah, through whom we have now received the reconciliation. 2 Peter 2 says, for if after they've escaped the defilements of the world, through the knowledge of the Master and Savior Yeshua Messiah, they're again entangled in them and overcome, the latter end is worse for them than the first. For it would have been better for them to have not known the way of righteousness than having known it, to turn from the set-apart command delivered unto them. What Paul's talking about in Galatians when he says, if we seek to be declared right, okay, we've escaped the defilements of the world and we're seeking to be declared right. If we're then found to be sinners, we return to those defilements. Okay, is Messiah then a servant of sin? It would have been better for us to have never known those things than to have turned from the set-apart commandment that was delivered to us. For them, the proverb has proved true. A dog returns to its own vomit, and a washed sow returns to her rolling in the mud. You can see why Yahuwah would feel so strongly about something. If they were seeking to be justified by the blood of his Son, by the death of his Son, for them to just take all of that and cast it behind them, throw it under their feet, and to say, I prefer the things of the world, I'm going to return to the defilements of the world. It would have been better for them to have never known it. Romans 11 verse 33 says, oh, the depth of riches and wisdom and knowledge of Elohim, how unsearchable his krima, his mishpatim, and untraceable his ways. And we're going to, in the second part, we're going to look at these mishpatim. Okay, and what we need to recognize when we're looking at them is that these things are his ways. They're how he operates, his justices. Says something similar in Psalm 103. Yahuwah is doing righteousness, tzedakah, and mishpat, justice, for all the oppressed. He made known his ways to Moshe, his acts to the children of Yisrael. Yahuwah is compassionate and showing favor, patient and great in kindness. So as we get into these things, it's going to be for the Shoftim, those who shafat on the earth, to carry out his Mishpatim. And for them, they have exacting standards of justice. You're either righteous or you're unrighteous. For Yahuwah, part of his justice is that he justifies those who turn from unrighteousness to do righteousness. He will justify them and he will declare them to be right, because he is compassionate, shows favor or grace, and he's patient and great in kindness. Proverbs 21 verse 15 says, to do mishpat is joy to the tzaddik, is joy to the righteous, but ruin to the workers of wickedness. And as I mentioned at the beginning, this Torah portion is actually one of my favorites, because it does show us what his justices are. And a lot of the things that we're going to see in the second part are going to challenge us as to what we think is right and what we think is wrong, and perhaps the way that we do things, the way that Yehovah does it is different. The way that he looks at things like ownership and possession of things is different from the way that we look at them and how perhaps the modern world would look at them. But we'll get into that when we come back in the second part. So last week they camped in the wilderness of Sinai. Moshe goes up to the top of the mountain to speak to Yehovah. Yehovah told him, "Now if you diligently obey my voice and shall cherish my covenant, then you shall be my treasured possession above all peoples, for all the earth is mine. And you shall be to me a kingdom of priests, a set-apart nation. Those are the words which you speak to the children of Israel." Moshe came and called for the elders of the people and set before them all the words which Yehovah commanded him. And all the people answered together and said, "All that Yehovah has spoken, we shall do." So Moshe brought back the words of the people to Yehovah. So part of what he said is, obey my voice. We see Moshe return to the mountain. He goes up. He's given the 10 words. As we saw last week, the 10 words are given, and then he's given the Mishpatim, the justices. Okay? Yehovah's instructions, though, are more comprehensive than that. There's an idea that people have that the only thing that we have to do as the covenant that was made with Yehovah is his words and his judgments, his words and his Mishpatim. So last week and this week. And then after that, we have the sin of the golden calf. And then because of that, they received a load of laws which were punishments. They also had to start doing animal sacrifices, which were because of the sin of the golden calf. Previously, they weren't going to have to do it, but all of these things were going to be added to them. Well, this is actually a terrible way to look at what Yehovah has given us. It's factually untrue because of reasons that we'll see actually as we continue through this. But if we look at what Yehovah's instructions tell us, then to say that a whole load of them, apart from the things we saw last week and this week, are things that we don't have to do, then we're missing so much. Okay, so last week, the 10 Commandments. This week, we're going to see his Mishpatim, his judgments or his justices for the judges to execute. Then what we get is instruction on how to build and sanctify a dwelling for Yehovah, including the tabernacle, the furnishings that are therein, and the priest's garments. Okay, Charlie will begin to look at that next week. So we're actually given instruction on how to build a house for Yehovah to come and dwell with his people, which is what he's wanted to do. So it's not a punishment. It's certainly not something that was added. And even factually, it wasn't something that was given after the sin of the golden calf. It's the very next thing that they're told to do after the Mishpatim. In fact, after they make the covenant with him, they're told, okay, now I want you to make me a house. Instruction on how to properly atone for fallen people and the environment so that Yehovah can exist in its midst. So as we saw when we were going through Leviticus last year, atonement is actually to do with Yehovah existing in the middle of things which are unclean. That death has entered into the creation, it's corrupted the creation, but Yehovah, who is holy, has come to dwell in the midst of creation. Okay, and that includes uncleanness in the camp. For whatever reason, people become unclean. And the red heifer sacrifice as well, how we make people clean. And that's all to enable Yehovah to dwell in the midst of his people. Instruction on how to approach Yehovah and his dwelling, gifts, offerings, and how to offer all of those things. There's a specific procedure. If you want to approach the Creator when he's come to dwell in the tabernacle, then you have to do it through various means. Certain things can only be brought to the door of the tent, and then they need to be given to the priest, and then the priest can bring it in, and he's got to prepare it in a set way. But all of these instructions, of not one of them is a punishment. Not one of them is a bad thing that would have been added to them because they had sinned. Okay, these sacrifices, as people call them, are actually ways that people can draw near to him. But we'll see that as we get onto the book of Leviticus. But this is how his instructions are given from here on out. Instruction on how to move the camp, including the trumpets and trumpet calls, so that you can call the leaders together or the people to move out or whatever it is. The order that people are to move out so that they can move his dwelling place from one place to another. The Creator God has come to dwell in a tent on earth and move about amongst his people as they dwell in tents. So there's a procedure as to how that has to happen. Instruction on how to be set apart from the nations as Yehovah's people. Things that Yehovah doesn't want us doing, that the Gentiles do. We'll see an example of that this week. Do not boil a kid, a young goat, in its mother's milk, which was a pagan practice. Things like tattoos for the dead, cutting yourself for the dead, and all of those things are things that Yehovah doesn't want us to do. People go very much overboard with this, though, and they start adding to the Torah, and they start saying things are pagan in origin, and so we can't do them. Yehovah is very specific over the things that he wants removed from the practices of the Gentiles. He says, these are the things that you can't do. These are the things I don't want you inquiring into. I don't want you being sorcerers, doing witchcraft and all of that sort of thing. But people go over the top and they say things like, wedding rings are pagan, or wedding dresses are pagan, and you can't do this and you can't do that. Yehovah is very clear on what practices of the Gentiles he no longer wants us to do. If something is of pagan origin, that doesn't make it wrong. It doesn't make it immoral to do. You know, all the Gentiles went around breathing oxygen for a long time before Israel were around. Does that make it a pagan thing? Does that make it wrong? You can take these things to the extreme, and they're obviously absurd. So we have to be very careful not to add to the Torah. When Yehovah tells us how to be holy, that's good, and we remove ourselves from those things, but we're not to be scared of doing anything that might have some kind of pagan origin. Instruction on how to establish judges and sins unto death. Okay, we're going to see a couple of different things in this Torah portion which are going to perhaps challenge our sensibilities and challenge our morality of the world. Sins unto death is one of the things that people find difficult to grapple with, that Yehovah would say that if you do certain things, then you will certainly die. You will muth, you will surely die. Instruction on the proper protocol for tithes and vows, including peace offerings, oaths, swearing by Yehovah, and the Nazirite vow. Okay, so a type of the peace offerings were vowed offerings, things that were vowed to Yehovah, swearing by Yehovah, what that actually entails, oaths that we make one to another. Okay, the Nazirite vow as well. Instruction on the set apart, the holy, and the set apart of the set apart. So of all the holy things, there's things that are set apart even from them. Translated often as the Holy of Holies. There are certain things that are Holy of Holy. That includes how to redeem something which has been set apart, the cash that would be paid to redeem something which had previously been set apart, how to handle those things, you know, who can touch them, what's not to be done with them, who can't come near them, and that sort of thing. Dealing with what is under the ban. So you've got what's set apart, and then you've got something which is under the ban, which means to be devoted to destruction, things which need to be destroyed. Yehovah has decreed that they must be destroyed. Instruction on the set apart days and years, including the Moedim. Okay, so your Shabbat right through to your Sukkot. Things like the second Passover, what you do if you're unclean and can't go into the temple on Passover, or if you're on a journey and you can't go to Jerusalem, what do you do? What's the procedure? The seventh year, what people call the Shemitah year or the Sabbath year, where the land will rest, and the Jubilee year, when all of the servants or slaves, or as we'll see, the word in Hebrew is evet. We'll come to understand that concept when they are let free, the year of release as it's known. And of course, the blessings and curses of the covenant. Leviticus 26, Deuteronomy 28. What is actually entailed if the people, when they go into the land, are disobedient, they lose certain blessings that Yehovah has given to them at the beginning of their society. Psalm 19, 7-11 says the Torah of Yehovah is perfect. It's tamim, it's complete. Bringing back the soul. And the word there is shuv. It means to turn. Okay, turning the soul. The witness of Yehovah is trustworthy, making wise the simple. That word's aduth. It's like his testimonies, the things which witness of who he is. The orders, the pekud of Yehovah are straight, are yashar. Rejoicing, that word again, samach, samaching the heart. The command of Yehovah, the mitzvah, from which we get the plural mitzvot, which people are familiar with, of Yehovah is clear and it enlightens the eyes. The fear of Yehovah is clean. It's that word for clean and unclean. Tahor can be translated as pure as well. Standing forever. The justices of Yehovah are true. They are emet. They are righteous altogether. More desirable than gold, than much fine gold, and sweeter than honey and the honeycomb. Also, your servant is warned by them. In cherishing them, there is great reward. So this is all of his Torah, all of his teaching and his instruction. Today, we're just going to be looking at the Mishpatim, but all of the rest is good. None of it is a punishment that has been given to people because they sinned. That's a horrible, horrible doctrine. If people online believe this, I'd suggest actually watching a series which is on the channel called Melchizedek's Priesthood. It's all this idea of we're now priests in the order of Melchizedek. And now we just do this part of the covenant because that's what they agreed to, and all sorts of twisted doctrines which make it a nonsense or declare this to be a lie. Psalm 25, 7-10 says, do not remember the sins of my youth and my transgressions according to your chesed. Remember me for your goodness and your goodness's sake, O Yehovah. And that word is tuv. Good is tov. Goodnesses is tuv. Good and straight is Yehovah. Therefore, he teaches sinners in the way. He guides the meek ones in mishpat. He teaches the meek ones his way. Again, we see this word mishpat linked here with his way. He made his ways known to Moses. All the paths of Yehovah are chesed and emet to those who shamar his covenant and his witnesses. Don't think that's my car, actually. Okay, Proverbs 1:1-5 tells us something interesting. Okay, it says, the Proverbs of Shlomo, son of David, king of Israel. This is what the Proverbs are for. For knowing wisdom and discipline, for understanding the words of understanding, for receiving the discipline of wisdom, righteousness, justice, and equity, for giving insight to the simple, knowledge and discretion to the young. The wise one hears and increases understanding, and the understanding one gets wise counsel. So we have the Torah, and they are the teachings and the instructions of Yehovah. The rest of Scripture is, of course, valuable and breathed by Elohim too. The writings, the Proverbs, this is what the Proverbs are for. They're to help us understand Yehovah's justices, what is behind his Torah, where he's coming from almost. The writings of the apostles and the writing of the New Testament, all of these things help us to apply what is the foundation, the Torah, which is what we will learn from this point out. So the first verse of Exodus 21 says, these are the Mishpatim which you are to set before them. When you buy a Hebrew servant, okay, the first time we're going to see this word, evet. He serves 6 years, and in the 7th he goes out for free for naught. This is the first thing in which our morality is perhaps going to be challenged. This word eved can be translated as servant. It can also be translated as slave. The corresponding Greek word can be translated as servant, or it can be translated as slave also. It's kind of a mix of both of them. It's not what we would think of as slavery, because when we think of slavery, we think of people who have been kidnapped and sold into slavery, that they are there against their will. That's not the Hebrew concept. It's not the Greek concept. Okay, the Greek and Hebrew concept could accommodate that, but that's not what's being spoken of in the Torah. Okay, it's an eved. So it's best for us to not try to understand it by the word servant or by the word slave. There's elements of both, because if you are an eved, then you are somebody else's property. And that is something which we find to be morally challenging. But that Yehovah, we know that Yehovah is just, that he is righteous. Yehovah's concept of it is different. It's not somebody who's being oppressed or forced into being an eved. However, it does carry you being someone's property, them having ownership over you. You have sold yourself to that person, so they do actually have ownership over you. But we'll see this concept becoming broader as we examine the scriptures. Leviticus 19 verse 15 says, "Do no unrighteousness in Mishpat. Do not be partial to the poor or favor the face of the great, but shafat your neighbor in righteousness." And when we see the Torah given, Yehovah does not favor the poor. He doesn't favor the rich either, but he doesn't disadvantage the rich in order to favor the poor. So the rich are going to be able to buy people into their service. Now, when we think of the ancient world, what that would actually entail, we think of our society. Okay, in our society, people will go out and they'll get jobs, and the jobs are pretty much just enough money for them to get somewhere to live, enough money for them to get some food and some recreation. The concept of an eved is actually something very similar in Hebrew culture. If you sold yourself to somebody, then you would enter into their household. You wouldn't necessarily live in the same house like we might imagine a slave in colonial America or something like that, but you would be part of their household. Maybe you'd live in another house. They give you your food, they give you your lodging. They would also give you work. So you would always have a job. To sell yourself to somebody would just be like taking a job that was guaranteed for the rest of your life. It's something that is entirely foreign to our concept of things, because we think, oh, we want to be free. But really, people today will do the same thing. They'll take jobs that just give them enough for food, somewhere to live, somewhere to be comfortable. To be an eved would also afford you a lot of security, a lot of protection. Okay? You're then the responsibility of the person who has taken ownership of you. You would also get paid for your service. They would give you silver for you to serve them, and they give you all of those benefits too. We would tend to look at somebody in that situation and we would think, you know what, I think it would be just to tilt the balance in their favor. Yehovah doesn't do that. So when we see in the Torah, when he says things about rights of ownership of somebody and things that somebody who has taken an eved is entitled to, that's because he doesn't favor the face of the poor. He also does justice equity, what is equitable and straight, to the rich as well as the poor. So we'll see that as we go along. Leviticus 25:35-55 says, when your brother becomes poor and his hand has failed with you, okay, so somebody who's not doing very well, then you shall sustain him, and he shall live with you like a stranger or a sojourner. So when it says he shall live with you, it doesn't mean he comes to live in your house. He'll live with you like a stranger or a sojourner. So he lives among Israel. Okay, the word for stranger here, we should be familiar with, is ger. It's somebody who comes to live in a country. They're not a native-born citizen, but they have the rights of a citizen. A toshav is somebody who is just passing through, someone who is there temporarily. Take no interest from him or profit, but you shall fear your Elohim, and your brother shall live with you. Do not lend him your silver on interest, and do not lend him your food for profit. I am Yehovah your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim to give you the land of Canaan to be your Elohim. And when your brother who dwells by you becomes poor and sells himself to you, do not make him serve as an eved. Okay? They're to be like a stranger, a sojourner, we'll see. Okay, it says, but as a hired servant, as a toshav, he is with you and serves you until the year of Jubilee. So when your brother becomes poor, and they would be in the position where somebody might say, I want to be someone's eved, I want to sell myself, I want to live in their household, I want them to provide these protections and afford me the things that I need for my life, and I want them to give me silver. This is saying, don't have them to be an eved. Have them be a hired servant. This word sakir, we'll see again, comes from the word sakar, which is to hire something. Okay? So they are as someone that you've hired, like a worker. Okay, and as a toshav, he is with you. So he's like somebody who's just living amongst Israel. That is how they are to be, but they are not an eved. And the reason that they're not an eved is because to be an eved carries the connotation of ownership, of them being a possession. There's something that you're taking ownership of, and that actually confers various rights and responsibilities on you, as we'll see. Then he shall leave you, he and his children with him, and he shall return to his own clan, his own mishpacha, even return to the possession of his fathers. For they are my eved, whom I brought out of the land of Mitzrayim. They are not sold as eved. So Yehovah says, they're my eved. They're not sold as eved. There can be no one's possession. They're mine. Do not rule over him severely, but you shall fear your Elohim. And when it says rule over him severely, this is to take the rights that you have over something that you are the owner of. For example, if you own an eved, you are just and right in punishing them if they step out of line. Okay, and that's your right of ownership over somebody. They've come to live in your household or to be a part of your household. If they step out of line, they start doing things that are wrong, you have a right of punishment over them. You can punish them. Not so with the Hebrew. Your male and female eved, whom you have from the nations that are around you, from them you buy male and female eved. Also from the sons of the toshav sojourning among you, from them you buy, and from their clans who are with you, which they shall bring forth in your land, and they shall be your property. Okay, so there's a difference between being an eved and being a Hebrew who is sold because they have become poor. Okay, only of the people who are living among you and of the nations can you take eved. Like I say though, it's not our idea of slavery. You can't oppress somebody. You can't be cruel towards somebody. If you're punishing them, that cannot go over the top. And we're going to see what is said of eved, the protections which are afforded to these eved. You shall take them as an inheritance for your children after you, to inherit them as a possession. They are your aved for all time. So somebody can sell themselves to you, and that can be for all time. You'll pass them on as a possession to your children. But none of it is not consensual. Again, they would come into your household, you'd look after them, give them everything that they needed. They would be safe and protected. You would have given them a sum of silver as well for their service, for the fact that they were going to sell themselves to you as a possession. But none of it is a bad thing. Okay, none of it's like slavery as we would think of it, where people are being kidnapped and sold. Nothing like that is part of Yehovah's system of justice. To inherit them as a possession, they are your aved for all time. But over your brothers, the children of Israel, you do not rule severely one over another. Now when a ger or a toshav with you becomes rich, and your brother with him becomes poor, and sells himself to the ger or to the toshav with you, or to a member of the ger's clan. Okay, so a Hebrew has become poor. If they sold themselves to you, then they would go out after 6 years. In the 7th year, they would go out. If it happens that they sell themselves to a ger or a toshav who's living amongst Israel, there's a responsibility upon us. After he has been sold, there is a right of redemption to him. One of his brothers does redeem him, or his uncle's son does redeem him, or anyone who is a close relative to him in his clan does redeem him. Or if he's able, then he shall redeem himself, which alone should show us there's something else going on here. It's not like our idea of slavery. They would have received a large sum of silver for the fact that they had sold themselves and they were going to serve this person for the rest of their life. He shall reckon with him who bought him. The price of his release shall be according to the number of years from the year that he was sold until the year of the Jubilee, as the days of a hired servant it is with him. Okay, so if there was 25 years, okay, until the Jubilee when he was bought, and he was bought for £25, and then when he is redeemed, there's 20 years left. The price of his redemption would be £20. If there are yet many years, according to them, he repays the price of his redemption from the silver of his purchase. So this is a man who still has his silver. So if he's able to, then he has to redeem himself. If few years are left until the year of Jubilee, then he shall reckon with him, and according to his years, he repays him the price of his redemption. So it's all proportional to how many years of service he has left. He is with him as a yearly hired servant, somebody who is hired for money, and he does not rule with severity over him before your eyes. So he is not allowed to be treated as this person's property, as in you do not have the right to punish such a person. And if he is not redeemed in these years, then he shall be released in the year of Jubilee, he and his children with him. So all Hebrews are released in the year of Jubilee. Because the children of Israel are aved to me, to Yehovah. They are my servants whom I brought out of the land of Mitzrayim. I am Yehovah, your Elohim. So because the children of Israel are aved to Yehovah, then he has that right of ownership. He has that possession over them, and they can't be sold to anybody else as if they belong to them. In Deuteronomy 15, 12 to 15, it says, when your brother is sold to you, a Hebrew man or a Hebrew woman, and shall serve you 6 years, then let him go free from you in the 7th year. When you send him away free from you, let him not go away empty-handed. You shall richly supply him from your flock and from your threshing floor and from your winepress with that which Yehovah has blessed you with, give to him. And you shall remember that you were an aved in the land of Mitzrayim, and Yehovah your Elohim redeemed you. So when your brother is poor and sells himself to you, they serve for 6 years. In the 7th year, they go out. When they go out, you have to give them a load of stuff as well, which you might think, oh, what's the benefit in hiring a Hebrew? I'll just get an Eved from the nations. But we're told later in verse 18, it says, let it not be hard in your eyes when you send him away free from you, for he has been worth a double hired servant. That doesn't mean it's not hard to you because look how hard they've worked. They've been worth two servants. That's not what it's saying. A double hired servant, a sakir, double a sakir. When it says worth, it's the word sakar, okay? Sakar means hire. You give somebody their hire. So when it says he has been worth a double hired servant, what it's saying is his hire was twice as much as a hired servant. So it's saying don't let it be hard that his hire has been twice as much to you as a hired servant in serving you 6 years. Yehovah your Elohim shall bless you. So it's saying redeem your brothers. Don't let that be hard to you. Yehovah will bless you for doing this. It's going to cost you twice as much to have them as a servant as it would anyone else that you'd want to pay. But don't let that be hard to you because Yehovah will bless you. If he comes in by himself, he goes out by himself. If he comes in married, then his wife shall go out with him. If his master has given him a wife, and she has borne him sons or daughters, the wife and her children are her master's, and he goes out by himself. Okay, so on first blush, you might think, I don't really understand what's happening here. This seems unjust. Remember that Yehovah says that justice must be done to the poor as well as to the rich. Both of them have to be dealt with justly. If you were saying his master has given him a wife who his master has paid for, and because he's done this act of kindness to him, when he goes out free, and again, he's having him serve 6 years and then giving him twice as much stuff. He's cost him twice as much as a hired servant. Then on top of that, he's got to give him the other eved that he's paid for. That would not be just to his master. This is not saying, though, that he cannot have his wife. It just means that his wife would need to be redeemed. The fact that his master has paid for his wife to serve him as well, she has a monetary value. She must be redeemed from his household. It's not just expected of the rich to go out of pocket. Okay, he's already redeemed somebody who is poor. He's already taken him into his household and then given him twice as much as it would have cost him to get anyone else. Redemption has to be made for his wife as well. But again, it's all to do with this ownership, which is the master takes upon himself for the servant, this responsibility that comes from him. And we're going to see throughout the other laws as well that there are rights that are conferred from this, and there are responsibilities that come from this too. Numbers 30 verse 6 tells us, talking about a woman who was previously in her father's household. Okay, as we're going to see, when this woman is in her father's household, the right of ownership to her is her father. A man in his father's household, the right of ownership for him is on his father as well. His children are his property according to the scriptures. When a wife becomes a husband, or when a woman becomes a husband, she belongs to her husband, and then her husband can annul vows that she makes as well. So when a woman becomes wife to somebody who is already owned by a master, then she does not become her husband. She does not then belong to her husband, is what this is saying to us. Joshua 7 verse 24 says, Then Yehoshua and all Yisrael with him took Achan, son of Zerach, and the silver and the garment and the wedge of gold that he'd taken that was under the ban, was meant to be destroyed. He hid it under his tent. Also took his sons and his daughters, his oxen, his donkeys, his sheep, and his tent, and all that he had. They're all his possessions at this point. The right of ownership of them is his. Like I say, this is not a bad thing as we would think of it as a bad thing. Okay, we've got all of these kind of ideas in our heads from feminism and all sorts of cultural things which sway our opinion on what is just. Okay, Yehovah tells us what is just. But his sons and his daughters are whoever's sons and daughters they are. When a woman is married, she then is the possession of her husband, but that's not like oh, you're my possession, I've got control over you sort of thing. It's just about rights and responsibilities. Matthew 18:23-25 says, because of this, the kingdom of heaven is like a certain man, a king who wished to settle accounts with his servants, with his aved. And when he had begun to settle, one was brought to him who owed him 10,000 talents. But as he was unable to pay, his master commanded that he be sold with his wife and his children and all that he had. So this is Yeshua telling a parable, and he recognizes that this is the state of play as well. This is a good quote from John Piper. I wouldn't recommend all of his work, but he says, "My feelings are not God. God is God. My feelings do not define truth. God's word defines truth." So if these things are perhaps challenging to our idea of morality, what we need to do, rather than to reject them as many people do, is to seek to understand them and look at things from a fresh perspective. If it was that there was this oppression and this cruelty that was implied by someone being someone's possession, then that would not be something that Elohim would mandate. Okay, so it's something different. Verse 3 says, if he comes in by himself, he goes out by himself. If he comes in married, then his wife shall go out with him. If his master has given him a wife, and she has borne him sons or daughters, the wife and her children are her master's, and he goes out by himself. They would need to be redeemed. He's just been given a load of stuff when he goes out. He would be able to redeem them. All this is saying is the right of ownership has not passed to this man. The right of ownership is still the owner's, who has done this act of kindness in giving him a wife, and they would then need to be redeemed. But there's some interesting words in this passage. Okay, his master, his Adon. The word Adon, from where we get things like Adoni, okay, it means master or it means Lord. Okay, I spoke recently about how calling Yehovah Lord is not a bad thing. It's calling him your master or your Lord. Again, these English words are approximations of Hebrew words. There's another interesting word in this. Okay, we've got this word here, which is Baal, which also means Lord, also means owner, and by implication, it means husband. Okay, this is the word Baal. You can see here, owner, husband, or Lord. People get all up in arms about the word Baal. They get this verse confused. It says, and it shall be in that day, declares Yehovah, that you shall call me my husband and no longer call me my Baal. People say, well, what this means is that people have been calling him Lord, and they're going to call him their husband afterwards instead of calling him Lord, because calling him Lord was a bad thing. It says in the Hebrew, you shall call me Ishi. Okay, if you want to make something yours in Hebrew, you want to say that's my whatever, you put E on the end of it, the yod on the end of it. So you get Adoni, which is my Lord or my master. Ishi is my husband. Baali is my Baal. But as we saw, Baal means owner and Lord. Okay? If the Aved truly says then, understanding this, I love my Adon, my wife and my children, let me not go out free. So again, from this we can see that this situation is not an unhappy situation. And there are remedies if the Aved is in an unhappy situation, which we'll see as we go on. But if the Eved says, I'm not going to redeem my wife and children, I want to remain in my master's house. I love my Adon, my wife and my children. Let me not go out free. I want to remain living here. Because remember, to an Eved, it is afforded to them that they can sell themselves, and then for the rest of their days, they are part of somebody's household, and they're looked after. And there's all sorts of good things about being an Eved. Okay, there's still people who can go about and do whatever they want to do. They just have a work role as well. They live in this person's house. To a Hebrew, it's been said, after 6 years, you've got to leave this person's house. Maybe that's not what they want to do. If they came in only because they were poor, then maybe they want to go out with stuff afterwards, and maybe that's a good thing for them. But if they actually wanted to sell themselves as an Eved and to dwell in that person's house for all time, they have a way to do that also. So if the servant, or the Eved, better to understand it with that word, truly says that he loves his master, his wife and his children, he doesn't want to go out free, then his Adon shall bring him before Elohim, and shall bring him to the doorpost, and his Adon shall pierce his ear with an awl, and he shall serve him forever. We know that we are Eveds of Yeshua. We are Eveds of Elohim. That's why he said about the children of Israel, they are my Eved. So Paul here, Shaul, an Eved of Yeshua Messiah. As I said, in the Greek, the word means servant, it means slave. It's the same concept, an Eved of Yeshua Messiah. James 1, Yaakov, as his name actually was, a servant of Elohim and of the Master Yeshua Messiah, an Eved of Elohim. Shimon Kepha, Simon Peter, a servant, an apostle of Yeshua Messiah. So we are Eved to Yeshua. Jude, or Yehudah, an Eved of Yeshua Messiah. Okay, so what we have in this picture of the servant saying, I love my Adon, okay, I love Adoni, I want to remain in his household. We can see a picture of us here, even in the putting an awl through the ear onto the doorpost, we can see something pictured, because we know to give ear, to hazinu, is to hearken to something, to shema it, essentially, which is what we do with the commandments. And we are to write the commandments on the doors of our house, which means that our household is governed by these commandments. So to have an awl through the ear to the doorpost would be a picture of us shemaing the commandments of Elohim. I love my Adoni. I want to shema his commandments. Verse 7 says, when a man sells his daughter to be a female servant, she does not go out as the male servants do. This would perhaps, on first reading, seem terrible. You've got to remember, when we're reading this, we're reading it in English, and it doesn't actually say that. If this were true, that a female servant doesn't go out as the male servants do, and a man was selling his daughter into someone's house, that would not be in accordance with the rest of the Torah. We've already read in Deuteronomy 15 verse 12, when your brother is sold to you, a Hebrew man or a Hebrew woman, so that includes women, shall serve you 6 years, let him go out free from you in the 7th year. So if it was saying that women don't go out as men do, it would be contradicting this. It's already told us this is the way that it is. When a man sells his daughter, okay, and now we get a bit of clarity over what it's actually saying. We'll read the Hebrew word, to be an amah. Okay, she does not go out as the male servants do, but it doesn't say male servants, it says Eved. Okay, so we know what an Eved is. An Amah, and we'll find out what an Amah is, doesn't go out as the Eveds do. This is the word Amah. And as you can see here, you could translate it to mean maidservant. You could translate it to mean female slave, by implication. Maid, handmaid, concubine. So this word is broader than just somebody who has gone into someone's service in their house. We see it used in Genesis 20 verse 17. It says, and Abraham prayed to Elohim, and Elohim healed Avimelech and his wife and his Amaz. So they bore children. So Avimelech, his wife, and his Amaz, his concubines, so that they bore children. That gives us a much better understanding of what's actually being said in this. When a man sells his daughter to be an amah, to be a maid or to be a concubine, she does not go out as the Aveds go out. So what's all this about a man selling his daughter? Like I said before, when a child is in the house of their father, then they are his possession. Okay, so possession is passed from the parent to the husband, and what will be done is known as a bride price, or what we might know as a dowry would be paid, and then that possession would be passed to the husband, along with all the responsibilities to look after the woman would be passed to the husband as well. When he takes a bride price for his daughter to be an amah, okay, so she goes into somebody's house to bear children to them, she does not go out as the Aved do. So it's an entirely different system of justice, which we're going to see. If she's displeasing in the eyes of her Adon, who has engaged her to himself, okay, so that should tell us that this relationship is different just on that alone, but she's gone out as an amah, she's engaged, then he shall let her be redeemed. Okay, again, Yehovah's justice is just to all parties. If this man has paid the bride price for her, and then he decides, or she decides in fact, that they don't want to go forward with the wedding, she should be redeemed because he paid a monetary value for her. So that money has to be paid. It could be paid by her father. It could be paid by another suitor. He shall have no authority to sell her to a foreign people. Okay, so she cannot be sold as an Aved because of him deceiving her. If he's engaged her to his son, he is to do to her as is the right of daughters, the mishpat of daughters, the justice of daughters. And this is what that entails. If he takes another wife, her food, her raiment, and her habitation are not to be withdrawn. And this word habitation carries with it the connotation of it being conjugal habitation as well. If he does not do these three for her, then she shall go out for naught without silver. So, if she comes into his household, he's paid the bride price for her, then she has to be redeemed. That money has to be given back to him because justice is a level playing field. However, if he then acts unjustly towards her and he is withholding food, raiment, or habitation from her, then that redemption price is no longer payable and she just leaves his household. Genesis 30, 14 to 15 is interesting. We know that the Torah was added because of transgressions. There were things that we see happening in the book of Genesis before this point which are unjust, which Yehovah would have governed differently. If he had given man a way to act in these circumstances, he would have had it done differently. It says, and Reuven went in the days of the wheat harvest and found mandrakes in the field and brought them to his mother Leah. And Rachel said to Leah, please give me some of your son's mandrakes. But she said to her, is it a small matter that you've taken away my husband? Would you also take away my son's mandrakes too? And Rachel said, therefore let him lie with you tonight for your son's mandrakes. So Yaakov had taken another wife and he had withdrawn from Leah her habitation or a conjugal habitation. Verse 12 says, he who strikes a man so that he dies shall certainly be put to death. That's mut again. The word's modified from mut, but it's essentially the same word. What Yehovah said, if you eat of the fruit of that tree, you will surely die. You will certainly be put to death is another way you could translate that. You will mut. When a word is repeated, it's adding emphasis to it. It's making it like you shall certainly do this thing. Death is kind of what it's saying. It's a much more extreme version than saying you shall die. But if he did not lie in wait, but Elohim allowed him to meet his hand, then I shall appoint for you a place where he is to flee. But when a man acts presumptuously against his neighbor to kill him by guile, you are to take him even from my altar to die. So the altar would make people holy, and you wouldn't be dealing with the holy in such a way as to go in there and take him from the altar. But Yehovah is saying it's that important that somebody is put to death in this instance. You're to take him even from my altar. He says that he allows for, if he did not lie in wait, but Elohim allowed him to meet his hand. In other words, if this was an accidental death, this is covered in more detail in other parts of the Torah. And if people watching online are interested in that concept, I would say go and look for this video on the channel, because this goes through it in detail and gives you visual representations of how that works. Verse 15 says, and he who smites his father or mother shall certainly be put to death. He who smites his father or mother, mut. He who kidnaps a man and sells him, or if he is found in his hand, shall certainly be put to death. Death to this man. Okay, so if you kidnap them and sell them, then you're put to death. So this element of our modern idea of what slavery is, where somebody can be taken and sold, that is not part of Yehovah's idea of what it is to be an Eved in his kingdom. Okay, this law as given here is clarified. Okay, it's clarified in Deuteronomy 24:7 to be actually about slavery. It says, when a man is found kidnapping any of his brothers of the children of Israel and treats him as a slave or sells him, then that kidnapper shall die. Thus you shall purge the evil from your midst. This was a consensual situation. Somebody selling themselves as an Eved was a consensual situation. In all circumstances, bar one, which we'll look at as we go on. If somebody has stolen something and they cannot repay it, then they are to be sold to cover their debt. Again, the Torah is added because of transgressions. Okay, Yehovah litigates in this case and says, no, this sort of behavior is not acceptable, because of course this is exactly what was done to Yosef. He who curses his father or mother shall certainly be put to death. Again, death, again, to this person. This idea of cursing your father or your mother is actually very serious in the Torah, and as we'll see, Yeshua takes it very seriously. Leviticus 20 verse 9 says, everyone who curses his father or his mother shall certainly be put to death. He has cursed his father or his mother, his blood is on him. So Yehovah requires blood, the blood of a man that has been shed by a man or a beast, to be reckoned. This is saying that his blood is on him. Okay, so the reckoning for his blood lies with him. His life, of course, is taken. Deuteronomy 27 is an interesting bit of scripture. It gives us a load of things that it said specifically, cursed is he who does these things, and all the people say amen to it. One of the things which is detailed here is, cursed is he who lightly esteems of his father or his mother. As we saw a couple of weeks ago, the idea of honoring your father and your mother is to add weight to them, add consequence, gravity to them, give them weight. Okay, he who lightly esteems his father or his mother, that's somebody who does the opposite to them, does not ascribe to them kavod, he does not kavad them, he is cursed. In Matthew 15, 1-6, it says, "Then there came to Yeshua scribes and Pharisees from Jerusalem, saying, 'Why do your disciples transgress the tradition of the elders? For they do not wash their hands when they eat bread.'" Okay, so it's part of the oral Torah. You wash your hands before you eat. Probably a good idea, but certainly not something that Yehovah says is sin if you don't do. So this is one of the transgressing one of the traditions of the elders. "But he answering said to them, 'Why do you also transgress the command of Elohim because of your tradition? For Elohim has commanded, saying, respect your father and mother, and he who curses father or mother, let him be put to death.'" Okay, so Yeshua says, I don't wash my hands before I eat, but that's just a tradition. Why is it by your traditions you transgress the command of Elohim? The command of Elohim says, if you curse father or mother, let him be put to death. But you say, whoever says to his father or mother, whatever profit you may have received from me has been dedicated. That is, it is korban, it is given as a gift at the temple, is certainly released from respecting his father or mother. So you've nullified the command by your tradition. So if somebody was disrespectful or cursed their father or mother, and he gave something to the temple as a gift, okay, which would have profited these people, then they released him from being executed. And Yeshua is saying this is wrong. So of course Yeshua is in agreement with the Torah. And it seems strange to emphasize the fact that Yeshua is in agreement with the Torah, because obviously he agreed with the word of Elohim. The problem is that the teachings of Christianity and of so many different things twist the word and say that things have changed after Yeshua. And I'm aware that there's people who are watching online who are very new to following the Torah that might be thinking, how are these things different? I get sent questions, why are these things not different? Why are we not given grace now for these things if we've repented? Verse 18 says, when men strive together and one smites the other with a stone or with his fist, and he does not die but is confined to his bed, if he rises again and walks about outside with his staff, then he who smote him shall be innocent. He only pays for lost time and sees to it that he is completely healed. So usually the law says if you smite a man, then you'll be put to death. This is saying if you smite a man and he doesn't die, okay, what you need to do is pay for any time that he's lost, pay his wages or whatever that might look like, and see to it that he is completely healed, okay? Afford to him healing. Make sure that he's looked after. Verse 20 says, when a man smites his male or female servant, his aved, with a rod, so that he dies under his hand, he shall certainly be avenged. Okay, nakam, nakam, avenge him sort of thing. When a man smites his male or female aved, this is what it's talking about when it's talking about you shall not rule over them severely, because you are allowed to punish people who are your servants if they do something which is wrong. It's not just you've paid for them and now they can just do whatever they want. If they become your possession, then you have the right to punish them. Verse 21 says, but if he remains alive a day or two, he is not avenged, for he is his property. And this isn't prescribing an amount of time after which they can die and nothing is done to the person. You know, it says a day or two. Well, is it a day or is it 2 days? Because if they die on the second day, then they've fulfilled, he's remained alive a day. Okay, it's just saying if he remains alive afterwards, he's not avenged, for he is his property and he has the right to punish them. Leviticus 25:45, and your male and female servants whom you have from the nations who are around you, from them you buy male and female aved. Also from the sons of the strangers, the toshavs, those sojourning among you. So these people are from the nations and from people who are passing through town, from whom you can buy somebody to serve you. These people might not be very good people. Okay, they might do things which are wrong. And in that case, they deserve to be punished. And the fact that they deserve to be punished is not my opinion. It's something we can see in Torah and something that Yeshua says. Luke 12:47-48 says, that servant who knew his master's desire, that Aved who knew his master's desire, did not prepare nor did according to his desire, shall be beaten with many stripes. But he who did not know, yet did what deserved flogging. So Yeshua is saying that this punishment is deserved. Okay, so he who did not know and yet did what deserved flogging. So this person who knew his master's desire and didn't do it, in Yeshua's eyes, deserves flogging. He deserves punishment, and this is a right which is afforded to somebody who buys an Aved and takes them into their house to take care of them. They are allowed to punish them. The idea of physical punishment in the scriptures is seen as a deterrent. It's something that is spoken about as a good thing when it comes to children. For children to be physically punished is a good thing according to scripture. And I've seen memes where people try to turn that idea around and say, oh, actually this word means this thing and that thing, and it's all actually completely inaccurate, the things in those sorts of memes. But the idea of punishing a child is something that scripture actually all the way through says is a good thing. Physical punishment of a child. To punish somebody in anger is not a good thing to do. It's essentially saying, I want to hit you because you've done this thing. That's not the punishment which is allowed in Scripture, which is advocated in Scripture. If a child does something wrong and it makes you angry, so you hit them, that just means that you've fulfilled your desire to do harm to that child. Okay, if a child does something wrong and you physically punish them and they understand it's a punishment, perhaps you've taken a bit of time to cool down and you punish them and they know this is a consequence of my action, then that is a good thing. And it's a right which is afforded to somebody who owns an Aved as well. When somebody's done something that deserves to be punished, then that is a righteous thing. That is a just thing. Again, we have to take our concepts of morality and allow them to be challenged by these things. Allow the modern world's idea, oh, it's not good to punish children by smacking them. Allow that to be put to the side and say, well, actually, that's not what the word of Yehovah says. Don't try to find ways around that and look for different meanings of words and say, oh, no, it's not quite like that, because the idea is implicit throughout all of Scripture. Deuteronomy 25:15-16 says, you do not hand over to his master the slave, the Aved, who has escaped from his master to you. So if somebody is oppressing their Aved, if they are being cruel towards them, and the Aved decides, you know what, I'm off, I'm going to leave this household, I don't want to stay here forever, I'm gone. Let him dwell with you in your midst in the place which he chooses within one of your gates where it is pleasing to him. You don't hand them back. There's not like, oh, the Aved has escaped, they must be handed back. Okay, that is not the system of being an Aved. It was something that everybody consented to. It was consensual. The punishment, if you'd done something wrong, is not a bad thing. It's not like, oh, they're being oppressed. If that was happening, they were allowed to leave their master, and they were not to be forced to go back to them. Verse 22 says, and when men strive, and they shall smite a pregnant woman, and her children come out, yet there is no injury, he shall certainly be punished, accordingly as the woman's husband lays upon him. The woman's Baal, husband by implication, probably closer to owner, what is being communicated here. The woman's Baal lays upon him, and he shall give through the judges. So we can't just say, oh, that's £1 million, please. That's what I want. It should be as I see fit. Okay, the whole process is adjudicated. Verse 23 says, but if there's injury, then you shall give life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, lash for lash. This is another element of Yehovah's justice which we need to reconcile our morality to. If he causes injury, then the injury is recompensed to that person, and that actually has a profound effect. We see something similar in Leviticus 24. When a man inflicts a blemish upon his neighbor, as he is done, so it is done to him. If you think of the check that is inherent in thinking before you do something to somebody else, is this thing going to be done to me? Then that's going to be a check on your behavior. Okay, you might not pick up the bat on the way out of the door. You might go and reason with the person because you don't want that to come back on you. Deuteronomy 19:16-21 says, when a malicious witness rises up against any man to accuse him of turning aside, then both men who have the dispute shall stand before Yehovah, before the priests and the judges who serve in those days. And the judges shall diligently search and see if the witness is a false witness who has falsely accused his brother. So someone's come and they have tried to get this person, tried to have justice done against this person. Could be the death penalty or whatever the punishments we see in Torah. Then you shall do to him as he thought to have done to his brother. So before somebody comes and falsely accuses somebody of something, if the punishment is going to be leveled against them, it's going to cause them to think. Thus you shall purge the evil from your midst, and let the rest hear and fear. That's what these punishments are for. The scriptures tell us specifically that these punishments are designed to make us fear the consequence of our actions, whether that's a child being punished, whether it's a slave being punished, or whether it's just somebody who's come to falsely accuse somebody of something. It's so that fear is instilled in us so that we don't do the wickedness that we had thought to do previously. Never again do this evil matter in your midst. Let your eye not pardon. Life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. That is what is just. Matthew 5:38, Yeshua said, you heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, but I say to you, do not resist the wicked, but whoever slaps you on your right cheek, turn the other to him also. So this might be something that somebody thinks of because it's quite a famous saying of Yeshua, isn't it? You have heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, but I say to you, which makes it sound like he is contradicting the Torah. But he's not. These things are part of Yehovah's Mishpatim. They are to be enforced by his Shoftim, for them to Shafat. They are judgments for the judges. This is all guidelines for the judges. If someone's been a false witness, do to them eye for eye, tooth for tooth, etc. All of these instances are for the judges to carry out. What Yeshua is saying to us is, for you, don't try and enforce this personally. It's never given for us personally. He's speaking to the ordinary people here. He didn't go to the judges and say, you've heard it said that you should be judging eye for eye, tooth for a tooth, but I say to you that you should change your judgment. That's not what he's saying. He's saying to the ordinary people, I say to you, do not resist the wicked. Okay, they can be taken to court, absolutely, but don't you say, you've injured my foot, I'm going to injure your foot, or whatever it is. Don't have retribution on people like for like. Verse 26 says, when a man smites the eye of his male or female servant and destroys it, he is to let him go free for the sake of his eye. If he knocks out the tooth of his male or female servant, he is to let him go free for the sake of his tooth. So in punishing your aved, if you go too far, and it's not just the case of, I gave him a lash or something like that as punishment, you go too far and you injure them. Okay, it's not just if his eye is destroyed, then you let him go free, or his tooth. Was it his eye or his tooth? No, he smashed his hand. Okay, it's a principle of justice which we are being taught here. If you go too far in punishment, then your aved goes free. When an ox gores a man or a woman to death, then the ox shall certainly be stoned, and its flesh is not eaten, and the owner of the ox is innocent. However, if the ox was previously in the habit of goring, and its owner has been warned, and he's not kept it confined so that it killed a man or a woman, then the ox is stoned, and its owner, its Baal, is put to death. So, you own an ox and it kills somebody. You had no idea that the ox was dangerous. You're innocent, but the ox is to be put to death. However, if you knew and you were negligent or you were reckless with your ox and you've allowed it to kill somebody else, then you are put to death along with the ox. It says, if a ransom is laid upon him, then he shall give the ransom of his life, whatever is laid upon him. So, if the judges decide in that case that it would be more just to levy a fine, then he can pay the fine instead. Perhaps he was aware that the ox was in the habit of goring, but it had been 20 years and the ox had been fine and it was no danger to anybody, and then, it just happened to kill somebody because they infuriated the ox or something like that. There's mitigating circumstances, basically. The judges are allowed to put a price on his life that he must pay. Whether it has gored a son or a daughter, according to this justice it is done to him. His sons and his daughters are his possessions. So if it gores them, it's done to them the same. Justice is justice in all cases. If the ox gores a male or female servant, he is to give to their master 30 shekels of silver, and the ox is stoned, and people get all up in arms and they say, so a slave or an aved, it's not a slave, we shouldn't use that word, an aved, okay, are they of less value? You've just got to pay some silver for them and then everything's fine. It's not what it's saying. It's saying that an aved is owned by somebody. If they also were someone's aved, you also have to pay for them to their owner because you've done them out of property. Again, this is all justice for the judges to carry out what's just in the case where somebody has lost an aved that they pay for. The rest of it's the same. They just have to pay the 30 shekels. Genesis 9 verse 5 tells us why the ox must die. Only your blood for your lives I require. From the hand of every beast I require it. Okay, so when he says what his justice is, if the ox kills somebody or your beast kills somebody, that beast has to be put to death as well. Verse 33 says, when a man opens a pit, or if a man digs a pit and does not cover it, and an ox or a donkey falls in it, the owner of the pit is to repay. He is to give silver to their owner, and the dead beast is his. So perfect justice, perfect equity is done here. Okay, you've dug a pit, something's fallen in it and died. It had an owner, so you've got to pay for it to their owner. But the dead animal, that's yours to do with as you want. Okay, and we'll see an example of the sort of thing that could be done with a beast that died of itself. You can use its fat, and we'll see that later. Okay, in a different case, where the ox of a man smites the ox of his neighbor and it dies, then they shall sell the live ox and divide the silver from it and divide the dead ox. So here, your ox has killed someone else's ox. The thing that you should do in that case is sell the live one, split the money from it, take the dead one, split that, and then justice is done. That is equitable. However, if you bear extra guilt because you knew that the ox was in the habit of goring, you knew it was dangerous, okay? Its owner has not kept it confined, the dangerous ox. He will repay ox for ox, while the dead beast is his. So in the first case, as we saw, when your ox kills somebody and you didn't know, you were innocent. In this case, you just split everything equally with the person who has lost property. In the case where you did know, you pay for the ox, but because this is equitable, this is just and fair, you keep the dead animal as well. The third part will continue to look through the Mishpatim, and we'll get a better idea of who Yehovah is and who he'd like us to be. Okay, so Exodus 22 then, continue with Yehovah's justices. It's certainly not a Torah portion for the feminists and the social justice warriors, is it? When a man steals an ox or a sheep and shall slaughter it or sell it, he repays 5 cattle for an ox, 4 sheep for a sheep. Okay, so if you steal a sheep, it's got its value. If you steal an ox, that's something that's more valuable, and it's valuable in a different way, because an ox is a beast of burden. It's something that you use to do your work. So because it's more valuable and you're actually depriving somebody of something that they need, that says something about your motivation or what you were thinking when you stole it. You weren't just stealing something like a gold coin or something like that. It's taking actually the means by which somebody lives. We also see things to do with millstones, and Yehovah has within his Torah that when an object is used for a man's work, it is of significant value. In Luke 19:8-9, it says, and Zacchaeus stood up and said to the master, "Look, master, I give half my possessions to the poor, and if I have taken whatever from anyone by false accusation, I repay 4-fold." And Yeshua said to him, "Today deliverance has come to this house," or today salvation has come to this house. So he's saying, if I've stolen anything, if you take something by false accusation, that would be to steal it. I repay 4-fold. He also says, I give half of my possessions to the poor. So this is something extra. In Leviticus 6:2-5, it says, when any soul sins and commits a trespass against Yehovah, has lied to his neighbor about a deposit, or about a pledge, or about a robbery, or shall extort from his neighbor, or has found what is lost and has lied concerning it, or did swear falsely, or brought a false accusation against somebody, so that he sins in regard to any one of these, all these that a man does, then it shall be when he sins and shall be guilty, that he shall return what he took by robbery, or what he has extorted, or the deposit which was deposited with him, or the lost item which he found, or all that about which he swore falsely. He shall repay its total value, add 1/5 more to it, and give it to whom it belongs on the day of his guilt offering. Okay, so our guilt offering, as we've seen in a spiritual sense, is when we admit to our wrong, when we confess. Here, when Zacchaeus confesses, he says, I'll repay 4-fold, which is what the Torah requires, and he also says that he's going to do something else. I don't know what was in his mind at the time, but it's probably, to my reckoning, to satisfy this sort of Torah law. Verse 2 says, if the thief is found breaking in, and he is smitten so that he dies, there is no guilt for his bloodshed. If the sun has risen on him, there is guilt for his bloodshed. He shall certainly repay. If he is not the means, then he shall be sold for his theft. Okay, still in that situation, somebody's not in a situation where they are being oppressed or treated cruelly or anything like that. They've just become an aved in order to pay off what was owed. Maybe it was just a little bit of their price that was owed, so they could pay that off, and then once they'd served the time that they needed to get that much of the money, they could redeem themselves from their master. Well, what this is saying is if someone breaks into your house and the sun has risen, there's guilt for killing them. Again, what we're dealing with here is Yehovah's Mishpat, his idea of justice. If you have to be killed if you smite a man, this is saying in the situation when the judges are facing the situation where somebody's been breaking in and the sun hasn't risen, so that's obviously saying that it's dark, it's night when the thief breaks in, scripturally speaking, they die, you smite them and they die, then you are not held accountable. This is not saying if someone breaks in, kill them. That's not what it's saying. It's saying that if you smite them and they die and it's dark, then there's no guilt for his blood on you. In other words, what that's saying is that you don't have to be killed on account of their blood having been shed, which would normally be the course of things. It's not saying kill someone who's breaking in. And we can see from the fact that it says if the sun has risen on them and you kill them, then you are guilty. And having guilt for his bloodshed, as I say, means that you will be killed. So if the sun's risen on them, and you kill them if they break in, then you will be killed also. This is just guidelines for judges in these cases, though, saying, listen, if someone's died when they were breaking into someone's property, there's no blood guilt for them, because that's what justice is. You couldn't hold somebody to account for that situation. Not that they were just in killing them, just that it is not just, if it was dark, for them to be held to account with their lives. If the theft is indeed found, the thing stolen, alive in his hand, whether it is an ox or donkey or sheep, he repays double. So what's happening here is, if you've deprived somebody of something, if it's something that's just an item of value, you repay fourfold. If it's something they need for their livelihood, you repay 5 times as much. But if you find them breaking in, you find the thing that they were trying to steal, then they repay double. Verse 5 says, when a man lets a field or vineyard be grazed bare and lets loose his livestock and it feeds in another man's field, he repays from the best of his own field and the best of his own vineyard. When fire breaks out and spreads to thorn bushes so that stacked grain or standing grain or the field is consumed, he who kindled the fire shall certainly repay. Okay, so in the first instance, you've allowed your animal to eat someone else's stuff, you must repay. But you don't repay with just give them the same stuff. You know, your beasts might have eaten their strawberries. If you've got some strawberries and you say, I'm going to give them these horrible scrotty strawberries in return, I've given them the strawberries back, says that that's not acceptable. So we can learn something here about what Yehovah expects from us. You give the best of your stuff. Okay, they have been put out by the fact that their stuff's been destroyed. So when you return it, you give them the best of your stuff. If a fire breaks out, then the person who lit the fire in this case isn't to blame for it spreading. Okay, they didn't commit arson. They didn't try to burn everything down. The fire has spread. Okay, so that person is not to blame. So justice requires in that situation, the person whose stuff was burnt, they were not to blame either. So in that situation, the just thing to do is that he has to repay it, because he lit the fire. Without him lighting the fire, it would have never spread. So that in that situation is the just thing to do. And we can take that principle and apply it to many situations. Verse 7 says, when a man gives silver or goods to his neighbor to guard, and it is stolen out of the man's house, if the thief is found, he repays double. Okay, so someone's given stuff to you to look after, it gets stolen, it's repaid double. If the thief is not found, though, then the master of the house or the owner of the house shall be brought before Elohim to see whether he has put his hand into his neighbor's goods. Okay, so if you say, oh, that thing that you lent me, it got nicked, you'd be brought before Elohim to see whether or not it was actually you who did that thing. For every matter of transgression, for ox, for donkey, for sheep, for garments, or for whatever is lost, which another claims to be his, let the matter of them both come before Elohim. Whomever Elohim declares wrong repays double to his neighbor. And what this could be saying is 2 things. It could be saying that you swear an oath about it. And we're going to see an example of that in a second. The other thing that it could be saying is that the Urim and the Thummim are cast, and then Elohim gives his decision through the Urim or the Thummim. It's mentioned in proximity to another matter of an oath being given. So I think maybe it's the oath, but it could have been either one of those. Okay, for every matter of transgression, for ox, donkey, sheep, garment, or for whatever is lost, which another claims to be his, in that case they must both come before Elohim, and whomever Elohim declares wrong repays double. When a man gives to his neighbor a donkey or ox or sheep or any beast to watch over, and it dies or is injured or is driven away. So you give someone your animal and it dies, it's injured, it's driven away. Let an oath of Yehovah be between them both, that he has not put his hand into his neighbor's goods, and the owner of it shall accept that, and he does not repay. Okay, if we have a quarrel with somebody, the way that the scriptures suggest for us to put the quarrel to bed is for an oath to Yehovah to be made. If someone accuses you of something and you say, I didn't do that, then the way that the scriptures say that you should sort that matter out is to make an oath and say, I swear to Yehovah that I did not do that thing. And in that case, the other party must accept it. That is the end of the matter. Okay, woe to somebody who swears falsely to Yehovah, and because of the severity of that, the other party accepts it, and that is an end to the matter. He does not repay. But if it is indeed stolen from him, he repays. So if it's injured, it dies, or it's driven away, you've got to do this. You've got to swear about it, and then they accept that. But if it's stolen, then he has to repay. So if he's looking after it and it's stolen from him, then he's been negligent as to caring for the item that he's been given, and in that case, he's got to repay to his owner the item that was stolen. Hebrews 6 verse 16 says, for men do indeed swear by the one greater, by Yehovah, and an oath for confirmation is to them an end of all dispute. Okay, so if we have disputes between us, one to the other, and it's a matter of one person saying one thing and another person saying the other, or one person accusing the other person of something, what must be done and what must be accepted in that case is an oath being given to Yehovah about the matter. 1 Kings 8:31-32 says, if anyone sins against his neighbor, and he has lifted up an oath on him to cause him to swear, and comes and swears before your altar in this house, then hear in the heavens and act and judge your servants, declaring the wrongdoer wrong, bringing his way on his head, and declaring the righteous right by giving him according to his righteousness. So when an oath is made over a matter like this, Yehovah repays, and because this is the state of play, it must be accepted by the other party. Verse 13 says, if it is torn to pieces, then let him bring it for evidence. He does not repay what was torn. Okay, so you're looking after something for somebody, it gets torn to pieces by beasts. You bring it, the torn apart thing, for evidence, and that evidence is then accepted. Again, the Torah is given because of transgressions. For Jacob, he said, that which was torn by beasts I did not bring to you. I myself bore the loss of it. You required it from my hand. Okay, so Laban was requiring what was torn to pieces by Jacob's hand. So he says, I didn't bring it to you. So this situation, we can see that Yehovah makes judgment on. He shafats on this through his Torah, through litigating that in this circumstance, the just thing to do is to bring the dead animal, and that is accepted by the other party. Verse 14 says, when a man borrows from his neighbor and it is injured or dies while the owner of it is not present, he shall certainly repay. You borrow something, the owner's not there, you repay it. Okay, if it's injured or dies, or say you break something, you certainly repay it if the owner's not there. But if its owner was with it, he does not repay. Okay, if it was hired, it came by its hire. So if it's injured or dies and its owner was there, and its owner should have been, looking after the thing so that it didn't injure or die, the fault is put on the owner. Okay, if the owner's not there, you've got to repay for that thing. If it was hired, it came by its hire. If it's a sakir, we saw that word for a hired worker before, or a hired thing, it came by its hire, which is, the price that was paid for it. So if you're hiring something, then the fact that it was being hired covers it. Okay, so in the case you're hiring something, then repayment is not mandated. Verse 16 says, and when a man entices a virgin who is not engaged and lies with her, he shall certainly pay the bride price. To mahar is to pay the bride price for her to be his wife. If her father absolutely refuses to give her to him, he pays according to the bride price of virgins. So like we saw before, when a daughter is given in marriage, there's a price given for her. It's an actual transaction where the woman becomes her husband's, not in like some kind of oppressive way where it's like, I own you now. There's rights and responsibilities given to the owner. If her father absolutely refuses to give her to him, so you sleep with someone outside the marriage, the right thing to do is to marry them. You go and you pay the bride price. That's what it says. But the father, who is the owner, has the right of refusal. If that happens, it doesn't mean you don't do anything. It means you have to pay the bride price for a virgin. So I imagine that there's different bride prices for virgins than there is for not virgins. You pay the high bride price though, and that's the right thing to do. A note on the word virgin, because I've seen, again, I shouldn't even look at them. I've stopped looking at Facebook now, in fact, because these sorts of memes infuriate me. But there's this idea that the virgin birth is not the virgin birth because the word virgin can mean maid or young woman. And yes, it can mean maid or young woman. But the context tells you what it means. Like when the word is used and it says, for proof of her virginity, it's not proof that she's a young woman. It's her virginity. When it's talking about there being this miraculous birth, it's not a child was born to a young woman. It's a child was born to a virgin. That's what's notable about it. Okay, so we can tell from the context that it's virgin. Deuteronomy 22, 28 to 29 is a passage which is often misunderstood. We've just seen, if you sleep with someone outside the marriage, you're to give their father the bride price. If he refuses, you pay the bride price of virgins. In this law, it says, when a man finds a girl who is a virgin who is not engaged, so it's exactly the same situation. And it says here, it takes hold of her and lies with her. And people go, it's rape. She's being raped. And they are found out. In the other law, we see it's him enticing her. To take hold of and lie with somebody doesn't mean that you're raping them. And they are found out. They are found out. Okay, it's not that the man is raping her. It's that they are found out in what they've done. Then the man who lay with her shall give to the girl's father 50 pieces of silver, and she is to be his wife. So this is the bride price. Because he has humbled her, he is not allowed to put her away all his days. He's not just allowed to marry her and then divorce her straight afterwards. Genesis 34, 11 to 12 says, and Shechem said to her father and her brothers, let me find favor in your eyes, and whatever you say to me, I give. Ask of me a bride price and gift ever so high, and I give according to what you say to me. But give me the girl for a wife. Okay, so in this case, he had slept with Dinah. They weren't married. He'd found a virgin who was not married. He'd seduced her, and he says that he will pay the bride price for her, which is what the Torah says to do. Jacob's sons don't accept this. Okay, and what the Torah, which was given because of transgressions, tells us to do in this case is to either accept it or to refuse it and then still take the bride price. That's the correct thing to do. Jacob's sons, as we know, did what was unjust. Verse 18 says, do not allow a practicer of witchcraft to live. Okay, this is an example of one of the laws which distinguishes us from the nations. Anyone lying with a beast shall certainly be put to death. In Leviticus 20:16, we get a bit more information. It says that, and a woman who approaches any beast and mates with it, you shall kill the woman and the beast, and they shall certainly be put to death. Their blood is upon them. In Deuteronomy 27, again, the few offenses where it says, cursed is the person who does this. This is one of the offenses. Cursed is he who lies with any beast. Verse 20 says, he who sacrifices to a god, except to Yehovah only, is put under the ban. So offering up sacrifices to gods, not acceptable. Verse 21, do not tread down a sojourner or oppress him, for you are sojourners in the land of Mitzrayim. Do not afflict any widow or fatherless child. If you do afflict them at all, if they cry out to me at all, I shall certainly hear their cry. And my wrath shall burn, and I shall slay you with the sword, and your wives be widows, and your children fatherless. So here we see Yehovah talking about these categories of people that we see throughout scriptures, the vulnerable ones that he wants us to look after. And he pronounces these punishments upon us if we are to oppress them at all. Leviticus 19:33-34 says, when a ger sojourns with you in your land, do not oppress him. Let the ger who dwells with you be to you as the native among you, and you shall love him as yourself, for you were strangers in the land of Mitzrayim. And we see in Deuteronomy 27 again, this is one of the few things which are highlighted as a person is particularly cursed for not doing. Cursed is he who twists the justice of the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow, as given in this Torah portion. Verse 25 says, if you do lend silver to any of my people, the poor among you, you are not to be like the one that lends on interest to him. Do not lay interest on him. If you take your neighbor's garment as a pledge at all, you are to return it to him before the sun goes down. For that is his only covering. It is his garment for his skin. What does he sleep in? And it shall be that when he cries to me, I shall hear, for I show favor. So when you lend to somebody, okay, you don't act in any way which is different towards them. Okay, you still perform mishpat to them. We see in Deuteronomy 23:20, it says, to a nokri you lend the interest, but to your brother you do not lend the interest. That's a foreigner, literally somebody who comes from another country. Deuteronomy 24 goes on to inform us, when you lend your brother a loan, do not go into his house to get his pledge. Stand outside and let the man to whom you lend bring the pledge out to you. So you don't accrue any kind of extra rights over somebody. You don't treat them any differently. You can't go into their house and say, give me a pledge for that which I lent to you. Just the lending is, you don't lend at interest. It's just naturally what you do when somebody is poor, and it doesn't confer any extra status on you. And if the man is poor, do not sleep with his pledge. By all means, return the pledge to him at sundown, and he shall sleep in his own garment and shall bless you, and it shall be righteousness to you before Yehovah your Elohim. So here we've got the converse of that situation. If he cries out to me, I will hear him. This man shall bless you in your doing this, in your dealing with him like this, and that shall be righteousness to you before Yehovah. Proverbs 22:26 says, do not be one of those who shakes hand in a pledge, one of those who are guarantors for debts. And that's an interesting piece of scripture to consider here. Verse 28 says, do not revile Elohim, nor curse a ruler of your people. And we see this idea put into play in a very interesting situation in the New Testament. Acts 23:1-5 says, and Shaul, Paul, looking intently at the council, said, men, brothers, I have lived in all good conscience before Elohim until this day. And the high priest, Hananiah, commanded those who stood by him to strike him on the mouth. Then Shaul said to him, Elohim is going to strike you, whitewashed wall. And do you sit judging me according to the Torah? And do you command me to be struck contrary to the Torah? And those who stood by said, do you revile the high priest of Elohim? Paul doesn't say, he's just told you guys to hit me in the face. Yes, I'm reviling him. I think that that's just. Paul actually says, I did not know, brothers, that he was the high priest, for it has been written, you shall not speak evil of the ruler of your people. So this is something incredibly important. Another thing where we have to take our concepts of what is just, our morality, and we have to examine them in the light of Scripture and see why these things are so. Verse 29 says, do not delay giving your harvest and your vintage. Give me the firstborn of your sons. Likewise, you are to do with your oxen, with your sheep. It is to be with its mother 7 days. On the 8th, you give it to me. So don't delay when you're giving your tithe of your harvest and of your vintage. Same with the firstborn. When it comes to the 8th day, the day that you are allowed from there to give it to Yehovah, allow it to be then. Exodus 34:19-20 says, everyone opening the womb is mine, and every male firstborn among your livestock, whether bull or sheep. But the firstborn of a donkey you ransom with a lamb. Okay, so for the firstborn of all animals you're to give to Yehovah. But if it's a donkey, you're not going to take a donkey to the temple to be offered to Yehovah. So you've got to take a lamb instead. And if you do not ransom, then you shall break its neck. Okay, if you don't ransom the firstborn of an animal, then you kill it. Every firstborn of your sons you shall ransom, and they shall not appear before me empty-handed. Because this is when that was done. With your tithe, with the firstborn, what we're to do with them is we are to set those things apart to Yehovah. Okay, we don't deal with them according to what is profane. When they were offered is at the feast days. Okay, so you shall not appear before me empty-handed is what's said when the feast days are mentioned. Okay, so when they brought them up, they would not appear before him empty-handed with their burnt offerings, their vowed offerings, their tithes, their firstborn, everything that they would take up to Jerusalem. Deuteronomy 15:19-20 says, set apart to Yehovah your Elohim all the firstborn males that come from your herd and your flock. Okay, so you have a firstborn, you're not going to take it to Jerusalem until the feasts. But it says, do no work with the firstborn of your herd, nor shear the firstborn of your flock. So you set those things apart to Yehovah. You don't use them to work. You don't come up with ideas like, oh, well, maybe I'd have more stuff to offer to Yehovah if I used the firstborn to work, or sheared the firstborn of the flock. I'd have more money for this or that, or whatever weird ways that people justify using what is supposed to be set apart to Yehovah. You and your household are to eat it before Yehovah your Elohim year by year in the place which he chooses. So again, at the feasts, this is when it was taken up. It was taken to the temple. The priests would offer it. The priests would eat their bit, and the people would eat their bit, and they were to rejoice and samach before Yehovah. Verse 31 says, and you are set apart men to me. You do not eat any meat which is torn in pieces in the field. You throw it to the dogs. So you cannot eat it. Same with that which dies of itself. In Leviticus 7:24, though, it tells us the fat of a carcass, that is that which dies of itself, and the fat of what is torn, animals that are torn by beasts, is used for any purpose, but you do not eat it at all. So if it was going to be offered, it would be holy to Yehovah, but you can use the fat of these animals. So when we see before, when it's talking about the dead beast, you divide. Okay, there was value to these dead animals. 23:1 says, do not bring a false report. Do not put your hand with the wrong to be a malicious witness. Do not follow a crowd to do evil, nor bear witness in a strife so as to turn aside many, to turn aside what is right. So basically, if the majority of people think something that is wrong, think something which is contrary to Yehovah's word, don't conform yourself to their thinking. Okay, don't say something that you know to be false, especially not against somebody, a person. Don't follow the masses to do evil. Do not favor a poor man in his dispute. Again, we saw before that there are rights and responsibilities conferred upon the owners of a vet. We might think that we should favor the poor man in that situation and make it all about what's good for the poor man. Yehovah says it's not that way. Justice for the rich is the same as justice for the poor. Luke 3 verse 14. Interesting bit of scripture this, when John the Baptist says, bear fruits, meet for repentance, worthy of repentance. Different groups of people come to him and say, basically, what does that look like for us? What shall we do? Here, some soldiers also asked him, saying, and what shall we do? And he said to them, do not intimidate anyone or accuse falsely, and be satisfied with your pay. So he's telling them parts of the Mishpatim here. He's saying, these are the things that I can see that you do, which are transgressions. These are the things that you should turn from. Leviticus 19 verse 15, do no unrighteousness in Mishpat. Don't be partial to the poor or favor the face of the great, but judge your neighbor in righteousness. Just judge him in justness. Be just. Deuteronomy 1:16-17 says, I commanded your judges at that time, saying, when hearing between your brothers, judge righteously. So he's saying this to the Shoftim. He's saying, Shaphat righteously between a man and his brother, or the stranger who is with him. Do not show partiality in Mishpat. Hear the small as well as the great. Do not be afraid of anyone's face, for the justice belongs to Elohim. So this is what it's talking about in our Torah portion, where it's saying, do not pervert the justice. Do not favor the poor when you do these things. Proverbs 17 verse 15, again in the realm of the courts of men. He who declares the wrong right, he who justifies the wrong, and he who condemns the righteous, both of them are an abomination to Yehovah. So if a poor man has done something wrong and you decide that you're going to favor them because they're poor, and you start saying things like, oh, they've had such a hard life, and it's because of this or it's because of that, I'm going to favor them. That's wrong before Yehovah. When it comes to justice being done, justice has to be impartial and fair to everybody. Verse 4 says, when you meet your enemy's ox or his donkey going astray, you shall certainly return it to him. When you see the donkey of him who hates you lying under its burden, you shall refrain from leaving it to him. You shall certainly help him. So your enemy, somebody that you don't like, you see their thing. Maybe they've lost their thing. Maybe one of their things has somehow gone out of their possession. Maybe they've got a donkey and it's gone astray. You certainly return it to him. You take that time to take something to somebody that you don't like. Even somebody who hates you, you see them struggling. They see the donkey lying under its burden. You shall refrain from leaving it to him. You don't say, oh, I'm not helping him. You see them in trouble, you help them. You do to them as you would do to anyone else. Matthew 5:43-45. You heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies, bless those cursing you, do good to those hating you, pray for those insulting you and persecuting you, so that you become sons of your Father in the heavens, because he makes his sun rise on the wicked and on the good, and sends rain on the righteous and on the unrighteous. So like we saw before, when Yeshua is correcting their understanding about the application of something, when he says, can't remember what it was now. Oh yeah, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, that's it. When he corrects their understanding about what that actually means, here he's correcting the understanding of something else which is mistaught. You shall love your enemies. You don't hate your enemies. You've heard it said that what you're supposed to do is hate your enemies. As we can see from the Torah, that's not the case. And in fact, elsewhere in the scriptures, Proverbs 25 says, if your enemy is hungry, give him bread to eat, and if he's thirsty, give him water to drink. For you are heaping coals of fire on his head, and Yehovah reward you. Not that you do these things maliciously and you think, oh, I'll be doing them harm. What it's saying is, Yehovah is just. If you are treating somebody justly and they are treating you unjustly, that's going to go against them and for you. Verse 10 says, and for 6 years you are to sow your land and shall gather its increase. But the 7th year you are to let it rest and shall leave it, and the poor of your people shall eat. And what they leave, the beasts of the field eat. Do the same with your vineyard and with your olive yard. So 6 years, you can take all the crops. And the 7th year, it's for the poor and the beasts. Verse 12 says, 6 days you do your work, and on the 7th day you Shabbat, in order that your ox and your donkey might nuach, the son of your female servant and the sojourner be refreshed. Okay, so if people want to know what to Shabbat or to nuach is, go and watch Charlie's Torah portion from last week, because he covers it in detail in the second part. This is what Shabbat's about. Okay, Shabbat is ceasing from your activity in order to be refreshed. And in all that I have said to you, take heed, Shema. Make no mention of the name of other gods. And the word there is to zakar. To zakar is to bring to remembrance. Let it not be heard from your mouth. Does that mean that we can't use the names of the days of the week because they all have pagan gods' names among them? What is Yehovah's name? His name is his character. Don't bring to remembrance the name of other gods, what they're about. Don't look out the window and go, oh, it's raining. Bob the rain god must be angry with us. Okay, the name of other gods as opposed to the name of Yehovah. Verse 14, 3 times in the year you are to observe a festival to me. Cherish the festival of unleavened bread. 7 days you eat unleavened bread, as I commanded you in the time appointed in the month of Aviv. For in it you came out of Mitzrayim, and do not appear before me empty-handed. And we saw before what this is talking about. And the festival of the harvest, the festival of your labors which you have sown in the field, and the festival of the ingathering at the outgoing of the year, when you've gathered in the fruit of your labors from the field. 3 times in the year all your males are to appear before the Adon Yehovah. Do not offer the blood of my sacrifice with unleavened bread, and the fat of my offering shall not remain until morning. In the English, we're kind of like, oh, what's it talking about here? What sacrifice? What offering? The word for sacrifice here is zavach. Okay, the standard word for sacrifice, but this word is actually used of the Passover lamb, the killing of the Passover lamb. That is what Yehovah's zavach is. The word for offering here is chag. Okay, and that is a word for feast. Okay, you could use moed if you wanted to emphasize the appointed time, but chag is another word that's used of these days. So we know what chag it's talking about. We also know that they shall not remain until morning is said of the Passover lamb. So do not offer the blood of the Passover lamb with leavened bread. Bring the first of the first fruits of your land into the house of Yehovah your Elohim. Do not cook a young goat in its mother's milk. As I mentioned before, this is Yehovah saying these are the pagan practices which are unacceptable. See, I am sending an angel before you to guard you in the way and to bring you into the place which I have prepared. Be on guard before him and obey his voice. Do not rebel against him, for he is not going to pardon your transgression, for my name is in him. And I've always thought that that was a weird thing to say, and I'll look at that in a second. But if you diligently obey his voice and shall do all that I speak, then I shall be an enemy to your enemies and a distresser to those who distress you. For my angel shall go before you and shall bring you in to the Amorites, to the Hittites, to the Perizzites and the Canaanites, the Hivites and the Jebusites, and I shall cut them off. So verse 21, it says, he is not going to pardon your transgression, for my name is in him. Like, well, that's a bit odd, isn't it? The name of Yehovah. as Yehovah comes down and proclaims his name. Yehovah came down in the cloud and stood with him there and proclaimed the name Yehovah. Yehovah passed before him and proclaimed Yehovah, Yehovah, and they were compassionate and showing favor, patience, and greatness, and kindness and truth, watching over kindness for thousands, forgiving crookedness and transgression. He will not pardon, or he will not forgive your transgression and sin, but by no means leaving unpunished. So I'd always kind of thought, well, maybe it's talking about the not leaving unpunished bit, but to say he will not forgive your transgression always seemed bizarre to me. If you check what that verse says in the Septuagint, it says, take heed to thyself and hearken to him, disobey him not, for he will not give way to thee, for my name is on him. That's right, he won't give way to you in your sin. Not that he won't forgive you if you repent of your sin. It's that he won't give way to you and just kind of let you have your own way, for my name is on him. Verse 24 says, do not bow down to their gods, nor serve them, nor do according to their works, but without fail overthrow them, and without fail break down their pillars. And you shall serve Yehovah your Elohim, and he shall bless your bread and your water, and I shall remove sickness from your midst. I found it interesting the other day when I was looking at Zechariah and his wife Elisheva in the New Testament, John the Baptist's parents. It says that they were righteous and that Elisheva was barren. As Yehovah begins to reintroduce these things, it says in verse 26, none shall miscarry or be barren in your land. But the curses say that as the people get worse, Yehovah will start to reintroduce these things. So by the time Yeshua was around, or John the Baptist was around, you had righteous people who were barren again, just like you had before this was given. I shall fill the number of your days. I shall send my fear before you and cause confusion among all the people to whom you come, and make all your enemies turn their backs to you. And I shall send hornets before you, which shall drive out the Hivite and the Canaanite and the Hittite from before you. And we saw a couple of weeks ago how he does these things, that he can put people into confusion, he can turn people's swords against one another. But this is a promise that he's made to them, a promise that they decide not to believe his word when the spies come back and report that there are giants in the land. I shall not drive them out from before you in 1 year, lest the land become a waste and the beasts of the field become too numerous for you. Little by little I shall drive them out from before you, until you have increased and you inherit the land. And I shall set your border from the sea of reeds to the sea of the Philistines, and from the wilderness of the river, wilderness to the river rather. For I shall give the inhabitants of the land into your hand, and you shall drive them out before you. So this is how they did it. He sent the hornets before them. He gave them into their hand so that they could have military victory over them. Do not make a covenant with them, nor with their gods. And of course, we see this throughout Torah, something that is explicitly important to Yehovah. He actually says to not let them dwell in the land with them, lest they make you sin against me when you serve their gods, when it becomes a snare to you. So when we are in the land of the Gentiles, as we are at the moment, and we're surrounded by people who are following after foreign gods, this should be something that we have at the center of our attention, the risk that this is something that they may ensnare us to do as well. You think about things like Christmas and things like Easter. Okay, people find it difficult when they're living in the midst of the Gentiles to say goodbye to those things, even though, as we'll see in a second, they're explicitly forbidden by the Torah. You wouldn't find it difficult in the land of Israel in the millennium to not do Christmas, but if you're in the midst of the Gentiles, it's something you need to pay particular attention to. Deuteronomy 12:29-31 says, when Yehovah your Elohim does cut off from before you the nations which you go to dispossess, and you dispossess them and dwell in their land, guard yourself that you are not ensnared to follow them after they are destroyed from before you, and that you do not inquire about their gods, saying, how did these nations serve their gods? Let me do so too. Do not do so to Yehovah your Elohim, for every abomination which Yehovah hates they've done to their gods. So if you worship Yehovah in the way that the pagans worship their gods, like Christmas and Easter, which are done by the nations. Christmas and Easter are loved by all of the people of the Gentiles. They come from pagan traditions originally. If we take those and we make it about Yeshua's birthday or about his death and we worship Elohim through them, he's told us explicitly not to do those things. So what we can learn from this is that it's going to be difficult, or we may be more prone to do it, when we are surrounded by Gentiles who are going after all of these pagan forms of worship. And we may be tempted to try and make it about Yehovah and to do that. You can learn that it might be difficult, but they're told explicitly not to do so, and not to make it any harder for themselves by letting those people dwell in the land with them. 24:1 says, and to Moshe he said, come up to Yehovah, you and Aharon, Nadav and Avihu, and the 70 of the elders of Israel, and you shall bow yourselves from a distance. But Moshe shall draw near to Yehovah by himself. The word's Nagash. It's a word that's synonymous with Karav, to draw near. Let them not, Nagash, nor let the people go up with him. And Moshe came and related to the people all the words of Yehovah, all the justices, and the people answered with one voice and said, all the words which Yehovah has spoken, we shall do. So this is around the point where people start saying, well, they've agreed that they will do what Yehovah has said up to this point. What's that? He related to them the words, 10 words, and the Mishpatim. And they all answered and said, all the words that he's spoken, we shall do. If you wanted to be really funny about it, you could say all that they were agreeing to do was the words. Okay? What Yehovah has spoken before this, and actually how Yehovah sees this, Yehovah relates it to us, how he sees what they were agreeing to elsewhere in Scripture, which we'll see, is that they were agreeing to do everything that he said from that point onwards. Verse 4 says, and Moshe wrote down all the words of Yehovah, rose up early in the morning, and he built an altar at the foot of the mountain and 12 standing columns for the 12 tribes of Israel. And he sent young men of the children of Israel, and they offered burnt offerings and sacrificed peace offerings of bulls to Yehovah. What's going to come after this is he's going to give instructions on things like peace offerings and burnt offerings. Again, the Torah was added because of transgressions. It tells us how not to do certain things. So they were offering these things. It's yet to be litigated on. It's yet to be put into law how they should be doing these things. That's what he's about to go on and do. But it's not a response to them doing the sin of the golden calf. Okay? Burnt offerings and peace offerings are good. They're ways to draw close to Yehovah. Moshe took half the blood and put it in basins, and half the blood he sprinkled on the altar. And he took the book of the covenant and read in the hearing of the people. And they said, all that Yehovah has spoken, we shall do and obey. And Moshe took the blood and sprinkled it on the people, and see the blood of the covenant, and said, see the blood of the covenant which Yehovah has made with you concerning all these words. This is how Yehovah sees what they were agreeing to there. Jeremiah 11:3-4 says, and you shall say to them, thus says Yehovah Elohim of Israel, cursed is the man who does not obey the words of this covenant, which I commanded your fathers in the day when I brought them out of the land of Mitzrayim from the iron furnace, saying, obey my voice, and you shall do according to all that I command you, including everything else which is to come. And you shall be my people, and I shall be your Elohim. They are the words of the covenant, that they would obey everything that Yehovah told them to do. Moshe went up, and also Aharon, Nadav, and Avihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel. And they saw the Elohim of Israel, and under his feet like a paved work of sapphire stone, and like the heavens for brightness. Yet he did not stretch out his hand against the chiefs of the children of Israel. And they saw Elohim, and they ate and drank. And Yehovah said to Moshe, come up to me on the mountain, and be there while I give you tablets of stone, and the Torah, and the command which I have written to teach them. Okay, so So he doesn't say, that's it, that's the covenant, that's all I want them to know. Also, he doesn't say this after the sin of the golden calf. He says, now come up to me on the mountain and I'll tell you the Torah and the command, which they've now agreed to do. They will do all that I command them. Okay, so now Moshe is going to go up and he's going to learn about the tabernacle. He's going to learn about the burnt offerings and all of that system, which the idea is that was put there for a punishment because of the sin of the golden calf. All this happens before the sin of the golden calf, and all of this is a gift to us. It's a way by which we know Yehovah and his ways. It's a way by which we can draw near to him, and it's a way by which he actually came to dwell in the midst of his people. It is a horrifically bad doctrine to say that any of those things were given as a punishment. Moshe arose with his assistant Yehoshua, and Moshe went up to the mountain of Elohim. And he said to the elders, wait here for us until we come back to you, and see Aharon and Cher are with you. Whoever has matters, let him go to them. And Moshe went up into the mountain, and a cloud covered the mountain. And the esteem of Yehovah, his weight, his heaviness, his glory, dwelt on Mount Sinai. And the cloud covered it for 6 days. And on the 7th day he called to Moshe out of the midst of the cloud. And the appearance of the esteem of Yehovah was like a consuming fire on the top of the mountain. That's what it looked like. It looked like consuming fire before the eyes of the children of Israel. And Moshe went into the midst of the cloud and went up into the mountain. And it came to be that Moshe was on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. Next week, what Charlie will be looking at is the instructions for the tabernacle being built, the actual dwelling place of Yehovah, so he can come and dwell in the midst of his people. Shall we pray? Father, I thank you that you've shown us what it is to be just before you, how we can be pleasing to you, where we were going wrong and how we can correct ourselves. I pray for anybody that's listening to this online, that if they're challenged by the things in your Torah and things weren't exactly as they thought that they were, that they'd submit themselves to you. I pray, Father, for all of us that we would do that whenever we're met with something in your word, that we would seek to understand how it is just, that you'd be patient with us in those things, you'd be gentle. Show us your heart, Father. When people read your word, reveal who you are to them. I thank you that you've given us your Torah. I thank you for everything that we're yet to learn in this cycle. Thank you for revealing yourself to us, and thank you for justifying us so that we can enter your kingdom and be with you when you dwell with us again. Thank you, Father. Amen.